Lucas Reed never imagined that accepting a dare would cost him everything, or save the life of the woman powerful enough to destroy him. In a world where corporate wolves hunt for sport and single fathers are easy prey, one humiliating bet became a battle for truth, dignity, and a love that refused to play by their rules. But when a crane tipped toward catastrophe and the rain turned to blood-red mud, Lucas had one choice: let the system break him, or break the system first. This is the story of a man who wore work boots to a boardroom war and won. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights of Meridian Development Group's 42nd floor cast everything in a sterile, unforgiving glow, the kind of light that revealed every flaw, every wrinkle, every sign that you didn't quite belong. Lucas Reed knew that light intimately. He'd spent the last 18 months working beneath it, watching it expose him day after day. He stood now in the break room, a space designed to look casual but engineered for hierarchy. Leather chairs for executives, plastic stools for everyone else. Lucas leaned against the counter, coffee mug in hand, trying to disappear into the background the way he'd learned to do. The way single fathers with dirt under their fingernails had to do in buildings made of glass and steel. "Reed!" The voice cut through the low murmur of conversation like a blade. "Get over here." Calvin Moore didn't ask. He commanded, Senior Executive Vice President of Strategic Acquisitions, a title that meant he controlled budgets, timelines, and the careers of everyone beneath him. Calvin was the kind of man who wore his Rolex loose, just so you'd hear it clink against tables when he gestured. 52 years old, silver temples, teeth too white to be real. Lucas set down his coffee and walked over, aware of the eyes tracking him across the room. Calvin sat sprawled in one of the leather chairs, surrounded by his usual crew. Mark Chen from legal, Brad Vickers from finance, and two junior analysts whose names Lucas had never learned. They all wore variations of the same smirk. "You know what your problem is, Reed?" Calvin asked, though he clearly didn't expect an answer. "You've got no ambition, 18 months on the build team, and you're still wearing the same boots you wore on day one." Lucas glanced down at his work boots. Scuffed brown leather, steel-toed, broken in over years of real labor before Meridian had hired him. They were clean, but they weren't polished. They didn't shine like the Italian leather everyone else wore. "They work," Lucas said simply. Brad Vickers snorted. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. No style, no edge. You know why guys like you stay stuck?" He leaned forward, warming to his theme. "Because you don't take risks. You play it safe. Keep your head down. Collect your paycheck." "I've got a kid to feed," Lucas said quietly. "Safe pays bills." "See?" Calvin spread his hands as if Lucas had just proven his point. "That's the poverty mindset right there. You think small because you've always been small." Something flickered in Lucas's jaw, but he kept his expression neutral. He'd learned that too, how to swallow anger until it sat like lead in his stomach. 5 years of single fatherhood had taught him that pride was a luxury he couldn't afford. "But I'm feeling generous today," Calvin continued, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out his phone, tapping it against his palm. "I'm going to give you a chance to prove you're more than work boots and child support payments." Mark Chen laughed, a sharp, knowing sound. "This should be good." Calvin gestured toward the wall of windows that looked out over the main office floor. Beyond the glass, rows of desks stretched in perfect lines, each one occupied by someone fighting to climb higher, push harder, matter more. And in the far corner, behind another wall of glass, was the office that made everyone else's look like storage closets. Evelyn Ward's domain. "You see that office?" Calvin asked, though he knew Lucas could see it. Everyone could see it. "That's where the real power sits, VP of Development. Controls every major project on our roster. The Cascade Bay Resort? That's her baby. $60 million. Make or break for this company." Lucas said nothing. He knew Evelyn Ward the way everyone in the building knew her, from a distance, in glimpses, like watching lightning through closed blinds. Brilliant, ruthless, untouchable. She'd built her reputation by destroying budgets that didn't work and careers that got in her way. In 18 months, Lucas had been in the same room with her exactly 3 times, and she'd looked through him like he was furniture every single time. "Here's the dare," Calvin said. his voice dropping into that dangerous purr that meant someone was about to get hurt. You walk into Evelyn Ward's office, right now, in those adorable boots of yours, and you ask her out, on a date, face to face. The room went silent except for the hum of the HVAC system. Lucas stared at Calvin, trying to process what he'd just heard. You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking? Calvin leaned back, crossing his legs. I'm dead serious. You march in there, interrupt whatever meeting she's probably in, and you ask her to dinner, coffee, whatever. But you do it in front of witnesses. Brad Vickers was grinning now. Oh man, I want to see this. What's the point? Lucas asked carefully. Calvin's smile widened. The point, Reed, is that you've been invisible your entire life. You think people like Evelyn Ward even know you exist? You're part of the furniture, background noise. But if you walk in there and actually have the balls to shoot your shot, even if she laughs in your face, you'll have done something brave, something memorable. And if I don't? Then you prove me right. You are exactly what I think you are, a scared little man playing it safe until you die. Mark Chen pulled out his wallet, slapping a $50 bill on the table. I'll bet 50 he doesn't do it. Brad matched it. I'll take that bet. Reed's dumb enough to try. While Calvin pulled out a $100 bill, crisp, fresh from the bank, and laid it on top of the others. I say he chickens out before he even gets to her door. Lucas looked at the money. $200. That was groceries for a month, school supplies, a new jacket for his son before winter hit, and all he had to do was humiliate himself in front of the most powerful woman in the building. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. Dad, don't forget, parent-teacher conference at 4. Love you. His son. 8 years old. Smart, funny. Still believed his father could do anything. Still believed the world was fair. Lucas looked up at Calvin, at the money, at the faces waiting for him to fold. What do I get if I do it? He asked. Calvin blinked, surprised. Excuse me? If I walk in there and ask her out, what do I get? Calvin's grin returned, sharper now. You get to keep your dignity. Isn't that enough? No, Lucas said flatly. If I'm risking my job for your entertainment, I want the pot. All of it. 200. Brad whistled. Ballsy. Calvin studied Lucas for a long moment, his eyes calculating. Then he shrugged. Fine. You do it. Really do it. Not some half-assed whisper. You get the money. But if you chicken out, or if she throws you out before you finish the question, you owe me 200. Deal? Lucas should have walked away. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to walk away. But he thought about his son's message, about the conference he couldn't miss, about the fact that he was always one emergency away from drowning, and he thought about the way Calvin looked at him like he was nothing. Deal, Lucas said. The room erupted. Brad was already texting someone. Mark had his phone out, camera ready. Calvin stood up, clapping Lucas on the shoulder with a grip that was just a little too hard. Outstanding. This is going to be legendary. Mark, you getting this? Already recording, Mark said, angling his phone toward Lucas. Lucas felt the weight of it then, the setup, the performance, the fact that this would be documented and shared and laughed about for months. But he'd already agreed, and Lucas Reed had never backed down from a deal, no matter how bad it smelled. Better get moving, Calvin said, checking his watch. She's got a board meeting in 40 minutes. If you're going to do this, do it now. Lucas turned toward the windows, toward that corner office where Evelyn Ward ruled over spreadsheets and skylines. His heart hammered against his ribs. His palms were damp. But he started walking anyway, one boot in front of the other, across the break room and through the door that led to the main floor. Behind him he heard Calvin's voice, low and pleased. This is going to break him. The main office floor sprawled like a battlefield dressed in corporate camouflage. Desks arranged in perfect grids. Monitors glowing blue. The soft percussion of keyboards and the murmur of phone calls created a soundtrack of productivity that never quite stopped. Lucas walked through it all, trying not to think about the fact that Mark Chen was following him with a phone camera, or that Brad Vickers was texting half the building about what was happening. He focused on breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the same rhythm he'd used when his wife left, when he'd held his infant son and promised he'd figure it out, when he'd taken this job despite knowing he was outclassed. Evelyn Ward's office sat in the far corner, floor-to-ceiling windows on two sides, giving her a view of the city that made everyone else's cubicles feel like coffins. The door was closed, but through the glass walls Lucas could see her, seated at a conference table with three people he didn't recognize, papers spread between them, her expression sharp with concentration. She was older than Lucas by maybe 5 years, which put her around 42. Dark hair pulled back in a style that was professional without being severe. Sharp suit, slate gray, no jewelry except a watch that probably cost more than Lucas's car. She had the kind of beauty that came from intelligence and power rather than softness, the beauty of a blade that had been honed to perfection. Lucas stopped outside her door. Through the glass he could see her talking, gesturing to something on a tablet. The three people with her were nodding, taking notes. This was clearly important, clearly not the moment to interrupt. He could turn around, walk away. Tell Calvin the deal was off. But then he saw it. Calvin himself had appeared on the far side of the office floor, leaning against a desk, arms crossed, watching, waiting for Lucas to fail. Lucas knocked on the door. The conversation inside stopped. 4 heads turned toward him. Evelyn's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. A calculation. A rapid assessment of whether he was important enough to acknowledge. She stood, moving toward the door with the kind of economical grace that spoke of someone who never wasted movement. When she opened it, she didn't step aside to let him in. Yes? Her voice was cool, professional, with an edge that suggested he had about 10 seconds to justify his existence. Up close, Lucas could see details he'd missed from a distance. Fine lines at the corners of her eyes that came from reading contracts, not smiling. A small scar on her left hand, barely visible. And something else. A weariness that lived beneath the polish, the kind that came from fighting battles no one else could see. Ms. Ward, I'm Lucas Reed, from the build team. I know who you are, she said, which surprised him. You have 30 seconds. I'm in a meeting. Behind her, the 3 executives were watching with varying degrees of interest. Behind Lucas, half the office floor had stopped working to watch the show. This was it. The moment where he either did what he came to do or proved Calvin right. I need to talk to you about Cascade Bay, Lucas said. It wasn't what he'd meant to say. It wasn't what anyone expected him to say. But the moment the words left his mouth, he knew they were true. Evelyn's expression shifted. Not much, just a microscopic tightening around her eyes. Cascade Bay is on schedule and under budget. Whatever issue you think you found, it's not under budget, Lucas interrupted, and the air in the hallway seemed to crystallize. And it won't be on schedule if we don't fix the foundation problem in the north wing. Silence. From across the office floor, Lucas could feel Calvin's shock like a physical wave. Evelyn studied Lucas for 3 long seconds. Then she turned to the people in her office. Gentlemen, we'll continue this in an hour. Please excuse me. They gathered their materials and filed out, giving Lucas curious glances as they passed. When they were gone, Evelyn stepped aside, gesturing Lucas into her office. He walked in, hearing the door click shut behind him. The space was larger than it looked from outside. One wall was dominated by a screen showing real-time data feeds from every active project. Another held architectural renderings of buildings in various stages of development. The conference table was glass and steel, spotless except for the tablet she'd been using. Evelyn didn't sit. She stood with her arms crossed, regarding him with the kind of attention that made Lucas feel like every secret he'd ever kept was suddenly visible. You have 2 minutes, she said. Explain. Lucas took a breath. This was the gamble. The moment where he either saved his job or ended it. The Cascade Bay Resort is your flagship project. $60 million. Beachfront property, luxury condos, full resort amenities. You broke ground 8 months ago. I'm aware of my own projects, Mr. Reed. The North Wing Foundation, Lucas continued, was supposed to be reinforced with grade 5 rebar and deep pilings due to the soil composition. I've seen the reports. I've walked the site. What's actually being used is grade 3, and the pilings are 18 inches shorter than the specifications require. Evelyn's expression didn't change, but Lucas saw her hand tighten slightly on her tablet. That's a serious accusation, she said quietly. Do you have proof? I have photographs, material receipts with altered codes. And I have the original geological survey that shows why those specifications existed in the first place. Who authorized the changes? Lucas hesitated. This was where it got dangerous. I'd rather show you than tell you. I need a name, Mr. Reed. He met her eyes. Calvin Moore signed off on the material substitutions 6 weeks ago. Saved about $400,000. Made his quarterly numbers look good. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Evelyn walked to her desk, tapping her tablet. Calvin Moore oversees acquisitions, not construction. He's also trying to position himself for Executive VP of Operations. Making projects come in under budget makes him look efficient. But that north wing is going to fail inspection when the building inspector actually checks the foundation depth. And if it doesn't fail inspection, it'll fail structurally within 2 years. Evelyn set down her tablet very carefully. Why are you telling me this? It was a fair question. Lucas was nobody. Speaking up against Calvin Moore was career suicide. And for all Evelyn knew, Lucas was lying to make himself look important. Because I have a son, Lucas said simply, and someday he might stay in a resort that I helped build. I want him to be safe. I want everyone to be safe. For the first time since he'd entered her office, Evelyn's expression softened, just a fraction, just enough to show something human beneath the armor. You realize what you're doing, she said, accusing a senior executive of fraud and negligence. If you're wrong, I'm not wrong. If you're wrong, she continued, Calvin will destroy you. He'll make sure you never work in this industry again. I know. And if you're right, he'll do the same thing. Men like Calvin don't forgive being exposed. Lucas nodded slowly. I know that too. Evelyn walked to the window, looking out over the city. For a long moment, she was silent. When she spoke again, her voice was different, still controlled, but with something raw underneath. 3 years ago, I launched a project in Portland. Beautiful design, strong numbers. It failed inspection because someone cut corners I didn't know about. 20 families lost their deposits. The company paid millions in settlements. And I lost a year of my life fixing it. She turned back to Lucas. I swore I would never let that happen again. That I would know every detail, every decision, every risk. Then you need to see Cascade Bay for yourself, Lucas said. I review all the reports. Reports can lie, Lucas interrupted. Numbers can be adjusted, but the site doesn't lie. The ground doesn't lie. Evelyn studied him, and Lucas could see her mind working, weighing risks, calculating odds, deciding whether to trust a man she barely knew. I have a board meeting in 30 minutes, she said finally. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. I want you to drive me to Cascade Bay. Show me everything. Lucas nodded. I'll be ready. And Mr. Reed? Evelyn's voice stopped him as he turned toward the door. If this is some elaborate scheme to waste my time or embarrass me, you'll wish Calvin was your only problem. It's not a scheme, Lucas said. It's the truth. Good. She picked up her tablet again, already moving to her next task. Because I'm very tired of people who lie to make themselves look better. Lucas opened the door and stepped back into the hallway. The moment he did, he felt the weight of dozens of eyes on him. Conversations had stopped. People were staring. And across the floor, Calvin Moore stood with Mark Chen and Brad Vickers, his face twisted with something between confusion and rage. Lucas walked past them without stopping, heading for the elevator. He didn't have the $200 they'd bet. He didn't care. He'd just done something far more dangerous and far more important than winning a dare. He'd told the truth. And he had about 16 hours before he found out whether that truth would save him or bury him. So, the parking garage beneath Meridian Development Group was a concrete cathedral of echoes and exhaust fumes. Lucas sat in his truck, a '08 Ford F-150 with primer spots on the fender and a car seat in the back, trying to stop his hands from shaking. He'd just accused a senior executive of fraud to that executive's boss. In front of cameras he didn't know were rolling. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Nice performance, Reed. You just signed your own pink slip. Enjoy unemployment. CM Calvin. Of course Calvin had his number. Calvin probably had everyone's number, filed away for moments exactly like this. Another buzz. This one from his son's school. Reminder, Parent-teacher conference today at 4 p.m. with Mrs. Patterson. Looking forward to seeing you. Lucas checked his watch. 3:15. He could still make it if he left now. He started the truck, the engine coughing to life with a rattle that suggested the timing belt was living on borrowed time. As he pulled out of his parking spot, his phone rang. The number was internal. Extension 4402, Calvin's office. Lucas almost didn't answer, but then he thought about his son, about the rent check that was due in 5 days, about the fact that he couldn't afford to play games. He answered. "Reed." "You self-righteous piece of shit!" Calvin's voice was acid and ice. "Did you really think you could walk into Evelyn's office and throw me under the bus?" "I didn't throw you anywhere," Lucas said, navigating toward the exit ramp. "I told her the truth about Cascade Bay." "You told her lies, slander. You're going to regret this." "The material receipts are real, Calvin. The photos are real. The geological survey is real." A pause. Then, "You don't understand how this works, do you? You think because you wear work boots and play the honest man routine that you're somehow better than everyone else? You're not. You're just poorer and dumber." Lucas felt anger flare in his chest, but he kept his voice level. "If that's all, I've got somewhere to be." "Oh, I know where you have to be. Parent-teacher conference, right? How's little Jamie doing in school? Still struggling with math?" The anger turned to ice. "How do you know my son's name?" "I know everything about you, Reed. Single father, ex-wife left you for her personal trainer. Classy move, by the way. You've got about $900 in your checking account and a credit score that makes payday lenders nervous. You're one emergency away from total collapse." Lucas pulled over to the side of the road, his heart pounding. "Stay away from my son." "I don't need to go near your son," Calvin said smoothly. "I just need to make sure you can't pay for his school, or his food, or that little apartment you're renting in the bad part of town. You're fired, Reed, effective immediately. Security will box up your desk and mail you your shit." "You can't fire me for reporting safety violations. I'm not firing you for that. I'm firing you for gross insubordination, falsifying reports, and creating a hostile work environment. I've already documented 3 instances of you being aggressive toward female colleagues. By tomorrow morning, HR will have a file an inch thick." "That's a lie. Prove it," Calvin said. "Go ahead. Hire a lawyer. Fight it in court. We both know you can't afford that. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to slink away, find another job doing whatever it is people like you do, and you're going to forget you ever worked here. And if you try to tell anyone about Cascade Bay, if you so much as mention my name, I will bury you so deep that your son will be paying for it when he's my age." The line went dead. Lucas sat in his truck, hands gripping the steering wheel, breathing hard. Around him, traffic flowed, people heading home, heading to dinner, heading to lives that weren't currently imploding. His phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from HR. Subject: termination of employment. Effective immediately. Lucas didn't open it. He already knew what it said. He looked at the clock on his dashboard. 3:30. If he left right now, he could still make his son's conference. He could still pretend for one more afternoon that everything was fine. He put the truck in gear and drove. Jamie's elementary school sat in a neighborhood that was trying hard to be nice. Older buildings, fresh paint, playground equipment that was only slightly rusted. The kind of place where parents worked 2 jobs and still showed up for conferences because their kids mattered more than sleep. Lucas parked in the visitor lot and checked himself in the rear-view mirror. He looked exactly like what he was, tired, scared, holding on by his fingernails. He smoothed his hair, straightened his collar, and got out. Inside, the hallway smelled like industrial cleaner and construction paper. Classroom doors were decorated with student artwork. Lucas found room 14 and knocked. "Come in." Mrs. Patterson was 60-something, with reading glasses on a chain and the patient smile of someone who'd taught 3rd grade for 30 years. Jamie sat in a tiny chair beside her desk, swinging his legs, face lighting up when he saw his father. "Dad!" Lucas crossed the room and hugged his son, feeling the small, solid weight of him. For just a moment, the last 3 hours faded away. "Hey, buddy, how was school?" "Good. We did fractions today. I got 8 out of 10 right. That's great." Lucas released him and turned to Mrs. Patterson. Sorry if I'm late. Not at all, please. Sit. She gestured to another tiny chair that Lucas folded himself into, feeling ridiculous. I wanted to talk to you about Jamie's progress this semester. For the next 20 minutes, Lucas listened to Mrs. Patterson describe his son's strengths, reading comprehension, creativity, kindness, and his challenges, math facts, focus, a tendency to daydream. It was the same report Lucas got every year, the same gentle suggestions, the same reassurance that Jamie was doing fine. But today, Lucas heard something else underneath it all. Jamie's a special kid, Mrs. Patterson said, but I do worry about him sometimes. Lucas stiffened. Worry how? She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. He talks a lot about you, about how hard you work, how you're always busy. And that's wonderful. You should be proud of how much he admires you. But, she trailed off. But what? But sometimes I think he's taking on stress that 8-year-olds shouldn't carry. He mentioned that you had to work late 3 nights last week. He said he was worried you weren't eating enough. Lucas looked at his son, who was now studiously avoiding eye contact, suddenly very interested in a poster about the water cycle. Jamie, Lucas said gently, is that true? Jamie shrugged, a tiny movement. You look tired a lot. The words hit Lucas like a hammer to the chest. He thought he was protecting his son by working hard, by keeping the lights on and the rent paid. But Jamie had noticed. Jamie had been carrying that weight too. I'm okay, buddy, Lucas said, though his voice was thick. I promise. Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat. Mr. Reed, I'm not trying to pry, but if there's anything the school can do, lunch assistance, after-school programs, please don't hesitate to ask. We're here to help. Lucas nodded, not trusting himself to speak. They finished the conference with pleasantries and promises to work on math facts at home. When it was over, Lucas and Jamie walked out to the parking lot hand in hand. Dad? Jamie asked as Lucas buckled him into his car seat. Are we going to be okay? Lucas looked at his son, 8 years old, smart enough to read between the lines, scared in a way kids shouldn't be. Yeah, Lucas said, and he meant it. Yeah, we're going to be okay. I promise. Jamie nodded, satisfied. Okay, can we get pizza for dinner? Lucas thought about his bank account, about the $900 Calvin had mentioned, about the fact that he'd just lost his job and had no idea how he was going to pay rent in 5 days. Sure, he said. Pizza sounds perfect. As he drove towards the pizza place, his phone buzzed with another text. This one from Evelyn Ward. 7 a.m. tomorrow. Front entrance. Don't be late. EWW. Lucas stared at the message. Calvin had fired him. HR had already sent the termination notice. By all rights, he shouldn't step foot on Meridian property ever again. But Evelyn didn't know that. Or maybe she did. And she didn't care. Either way, Lucas had made a promise. He'd told her the truth, and tomorrow he was going to show her the proof. Even if it cost him everything, even if Calvin was already sharpening the knives. Because Lucas Reed had exactly one thing left that mattered, his word. And he'd be damned if he let Calvin Moore take that too. The pizza was cold by the time they got home, but Jamie didn't complain. He sat at their small kitchen table, legs swinging, telling Lucas about the fort he and his friend Marcus were building at recess, about the book Mrs. Patterson was reading to the class, about everything except the worry Lucas had seen in his eyes an hour ago. Lucas listened, nodding in the right places, making the appropriate sounds of interest. But his mind kept circling back to the same thought. He had 12 hours before he had to meet Evelyn Ward, and he no longer worked for the company that employed her. After Jamie went to bed, Lucas sat at the same kitchen table with his laptop open, staring at the termination email he'd finally forced himself to read. It was exactly as Calvin had promised. Gross insubordination, falsifying reports, creating a hostile work environment. 3 female colleagues had allegedly complained about his behavior. The complaints were dated over the past 6 months, signed by people whose names Lucas recognized but had barely spoken to. It was thorough, professional, completely fabricated. Lucas closed the laptop and pulled out his phone, scrolling through his photos until he found what he was looking for. The pictures he'd taken at Cascade Bay over the past 2 months. Close-ups of rebar markings showing grade 3 instead of grade 5. Wide shots of pilings that stopped 18 inches short of the specifications. Receipts he'd photographed from material deliveries, with codes that had been altered in black marker. And the geological survey, the original one he'd found buried in a file cabinet in the site office, marked superseded, but never actually replaced in the official documents. Lucas had everything he needed to prove Calvin had cut corners. But now that he was fired, would anyone listen? Would Evelyn believe him? Or would she assume this was exactly what Calvin's termination letter claimed? A disgruntled employee making false accusations? His phone buzzed. Another unknown number. You still planning to show up tomorrow? Because I promise you, security has your photo. You won't make it past the lobby. Cut your losses, Reed. Walk away. Lucas deleted the message without responding. Calvin was trying to rattle him, trying to make him back down before Evelyn saw the evidence, which meant Calvin was scared. Good. Lucas set an alarm for 5:30 a.m., checked the locks on the apartment door twice, and lay down on the couch without bothering to change clothes. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by dreams of cranes tipping and buildings collapsing, and his son's voice asking if they were going to be okay. When the alarm went off, Lucas was already awake. He showered, shaved, and put on the same work boots Calvin had mocked yesterday. Then he checked on Jamie, who was still asleep, curled around a stuffed dinosaur that was missing one eye. Lucas had arranged for their neighbor, Mrs. Chen, to get Jamie to school. She was already awake when Lucas knocked, handing him a thermos of coffee and a look that said she knew something was wrong but wouldn't pry. "You take care," she said in her accented English. "Jamie is good boy. You are good father." "Thank you," Lucas managed, though his throat was tight. The drive to Meridian Development Group took 40 minutes through pre-dawn traffic. Lucas parked in a public lot 3 blocks away, not trusting that his access card would still work in the company garage. He walked the rest of the way, carrying a messenger bag that held his laptop, the printed photos, and the original geological survey rolled in a protective tube. The sun was just beginning to paint the sky pink and gold when Lucas reached the front entrance of the glass tower. Through the lobby windows, he could see the security desk, the turnstiles, the elevators beyond. And standing near the entrance, checking her watch, was Evelyn Ward. She wore dark jeans, a white blouse under a leather jacket, and sunglasses that hid her expression. For a moment, Lucas wondered if this was a trap, if she'd called security, if Calvin had gotten to her first. Then she turned, saw him, and lifted her chin in acknowledgement. Lucas crossed the sidewalk and stopped a few feet away. "Ms. Ward, you're punctual. I appreciate that." She lowered her sunglasses, studying him. "You look like you didn't sleep." "Didn't sleep much," Lucas admitted. "Neither did I." She gestured toward a black SUV parked in the executive zone. "Shall we?" Lucas followed her to the vehicle, waiting as she unlocked it with a key fob. The interior was pristine, leather seats, the faint scent of expensive perfume, not a speck of dust anywhere. Lucas felt acutely aware of his work boots on her floor mats. Evelyn started the engine, pulled into traffic, and drove with the kind of efficient precision that suggested she did everything this way. No wasted movement, no hesitation. "You're fired," she said after 3 blocks. Lucas's stomach dropped. "You know, I received a very detailed email from Calvin Moore at 11 p.m. last night, explaining that you'd been terminated for cause, and that any information you provided me should be considered suspect." She glanced at him. "He also sent supporting documentation from HR." "It's all fake," Lucas said quietly. "The complaints, the write-ups, I've never been aggressive toward anyone at Meridian." "I know." Lucas turned to look at her. "You know? I've been VP of Development for 7 years, Mr. Reed. I've seen men like Calvin Moore destroy careers before. The email he sent me was too perfect, too thorough, too fast. If you were really the problem, he claims, there would have been a paper trail building for months. Instead, he produced a complete termination file in less than 24 hours. She merged onto the highway heading north. "Which tells me you scared him." Relief washed through Lucas so strongly he had to close his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the city was giving way to suburbs, then to the kind of coastal scrubland that developers loved because it was cheap and easy to clear. "Why are you helping me?" Lucas asked. Evelyn was silent for a long moment, her eyes on the road. When she finally spoke, her voice was careful, measured. 3 years ago, I told you about the Portland project. What I didn't tell you was that the person who cut those corners was someone I trusted, someone I'd worked with for years. He lied to my face, doctored reports, and smiled while doing it. And when it all came apart, he blamed me. Said I was too demanding, too detail-focused, that I'd created an environment where people were afraid to tell me the truth. That's garbage, Lucas said. The board agreed eventually, but the damage was done. I spent a year rebuilding my reputation, proving that I hadn't been negligent or incompetent. And I swore that if I ever saw that pattern again, someone cutting corners, someone lying to make their numbers look good, I would burn it all down before I let it happen. She changed lanes, accelerating past a semi-truck. So when you walked into my office yesterday and told me about Cascade Bay, I had two choices. Believe Calvin Moore, who has every reason to make you look like a liar, or believe you, a man I don't know who has everything to lose by telling the truth. And you chose me, Lucas said, still not quite believing it. I chose the truth, Evelyn corrected. If you're lying, I'll know in about 30 minutes. And if you're telling the truth, she paused. Then Calvin Moore is going to learn what it costs to lie to me. They drove the rest of the way in silence, the highway giving way to a coastal access road, then to a gravel drive marked with signs for Cascade Bay Resort Development. The site sat on a bluff overlooking the Pacific, raw and half-finished, steel skeletons rising against the gray morning sky. Evelyn parked near the construction office, a double-wide trailer that served as the on-site headquarters. The place looked deserted, too early for the regular crew, though Lucas knew the project manager usually arrived by 7:30. "Show me," Evelyn said, stepping out of the SUV. Lucas grabbed his bag and led her toward the North Wing Foundation. The ground was still damp from yesterday's rain, turning the construction site into a maze of mud and gravel paths. Evelyn's shoes weren't made for this terrain, but she didn't complain, just followed Lucas with the same focused intensity she'd shown in her office. The North Wing sat at the far edge of the property, closest to the cliff face. The foundation had been poured 6 weeks ago, the concrete already curing, the first steel framework beginning to rise. To anyone who didn't know better, it looked perfect. Clean lines, proper depth markers, all the right stamps from the inspectors. Lucas stopped at the northeast corner and knelt down, brushing away loose dirt to expose one of the pilings. "See this marker? Grade 3 rebar, rated for residential use. Light load, stable soil." Evelyn crouched beside him, studying the exposed metal. "And it should be? Grade 5. Rated for commercial high-rise, specifically for coastal environments where soil instability is a factor." He pulled out his laptop, opening the original geological survey. "This is from 18 months ago, before we broke ground. See the soil composition analysis? High sand content, seasonal groundwater fluctuation, erosion risk from coastal storms." He zoomed in on the recommendations section. The survey explicitly calls for deep pilings, 42 feet, and grade 5 reinforcement throughout the North Wing Foundation because this section sits on what's essentially a stabilized sand dune. Evelyn took the laptop, scrolling through the document. Her expression didn't change, but Lucas saw her jaw tighten. "And what was actually installed?" she asked. Lucas pulled out his measuring tape, moving to where one of the pilings protruded from the foundation. He measured carefully, checking twice. 24 feet, 18 inches short of even the modified specifications that someone approved. "Modified specifications," Evelyn repeated slowly. "Show me." Lucas pulled up the second document on his laptop, the revised survey that had been submitted to the building department 3 months after the original. Same logo, same format, but the recommendations had been changed. Deep pilings were now optional. Grade 5 rebar had been downgraded to grade 3. The erosion risk assessment had been lowered from high to moderate. "Who signed off on this revision?" Evelyn asked. Lucas zoomed in on the signature line. The name was barely legible, but the title was clear: Senior Executive VP of Strategic Acquisitions. Calvin Moore. Evelyn stood up, brushing dirt from her hands. She walked along the foundation line, stopping every few feet to examine the exposed rebar, the piling caps, the concrete joints. Lucas followed, watching her process what she was seeing. Finally, she turned to him. "How much did this save?" "About $400,000 in materials and labor. Maybe another 100 in inspection fees if the modified survey meant fewer site visits from the building department." $500,000, Evelyn said softly, on a $60 million project. He risked structural failure for less than 1% savings. He risked people's lives, Lucas corrected. This wing is designed for luxury condos, families, kids. Evelyn pulled out her phone, taking photos of everything, the rebar, the pilings, the foundation markers. Then she opened her email and began typing rapidly, her thumbs moving with the same precision she applied to everything else. "What are you doing?" Lucas asked. "Sending this to the building department, the structural engineer on record, and our legal team, also copying the board." She kept typing. "By 8 a.m., Calvin Moore will have a lot of very difficult questions to answer. He'll say I fabricated the evidence," Lucas warned. "He'll say I'm a disgruntled employee with an agenda. Let him try." Evelyn hit send, then looked at Lucas. "I'm the VP of Development. I'm standing on this site right now, personally verifying every claim you made. And I have the original geological survey with a date stamp that predates any revisions. Calvin can say whatever he wants, but the evidence doesn't lie." She started walking back toward the SUV, then stopped, turning to face Lucas. "Why did you really come to my office yesterday?" Lucas blinked. "I told you. The dare." "I don't believe that for a second," Evelyn interrupted. "You walked into my office prepared to talk about Cascade Bay. You had documentation ready. You knew exactly what you were going to say." Her eyes narrowed. "So I'll ask again, why?" Lucas hesitated, then decided the truth had gotten him this far. "Because I heard Calvin and his friends placing bets, and I realized the whole thing was a setup. They wanted me to humiliate myself so they could record it, share it, laugh about it, make sure I knew my place. And instead you used it as cover to report the fraud. Instead, I decided that if I was going to get fired anyway, I might as well tell someone who could actually stop what Calvin was doing." Something shifted in Evelyn's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "That's either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both," Lucas admitted. They reached the SUV. Evelyn unlocked it, but didn't get in immediately. Instead, she stood looking out over the construction site, at the steel and concrete rising from the bluff, at the ocean beyond churning gray and restless. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. Lucas frowned. "For what?" "For not seeing you before yesterday. You've worked for Meridian for 18 months, and I never once asked your opinion, never looked at your reports, never treated you like you might have something valuable to contribute." She turned to face him. "I've become very good at reading spreadsheets and very bad at reading people. It's a flaw I'm trying to correct." "You didn't owe me anything," Lucas said. "I was just part of the build team." "You were never just anything, Mr. Reed, and the fact that I made you feel that way is my failure, not yours." Before Lucas could respond, Evelyn's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, her expression hardening. "It's Calvin." "Are you going to answer?" "Not yet. Let him sweat." She silenced the call, then looked at Lucas. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Okay." "Yesterday, before you came to my office, were you really planning to ask me out?" The question hit Lucas like cold water. He'd almost forgotten about the original dare in the chaos that had followed. Yes, that was the plan. Calvin and his friends bet $200 that I wouldn't have the guts. And if I'd said yes..." Lucas met her eyes, seeing genuine curiosity there, maybe something more. "I don't know. I hadn't thought that far ahead. The whole thing felt like a joke at my expense." "It was," Evelyn said. "But here's what Calvin didn't anticipate. I'm very tired of men who treat me like a prize to be won or a challenge to be conquered. I'm tired of the games, the posturing, the assumption that because I'm successful, I must be cold or untouchable or waiting for someone to rescue me from my own competence." She took a step closer, and Lucas could smell her perfume again, something subtle and expensive that probably had a French name he couldn't pronounce. "But you didn't do any of that. You walked into my office with a real problem and treated me like a human being capable of solving it. You didn't flatter me. You didn't flirt. You just gave me facts and trusted me to do the right thing." "That's just basic respect," Lucas said, "which is rarer than you'd think." Evelyn's phone rang again. Calvin, persistent. She declined the call. "I have to go back to the office and deal with this. The board is going to want a full briefing and Calvin is going to mount a defense. It's going to get ugly. I understand. But I want you to know something. She paused, choosing her words carefully. When this is over, when Calvin is dealt with and the project is corrected, I'm going to ask you to come back to Meridian, not on the build team, as a project oversight specialist reporting directly to me, someone whose job is to tell me the truth, even when it's inconvenient. Lucas stared at her. You're offering me a job? After I just got fired? I'm offering you a position that should have existed all along. Someone has to keep people like Calvin honest, and I clearly can't do it alone. She extended her hand. Think about it. Lucas shook her hand, feeling the strength in her grip. I don't need to think about it. Yes. Good. Evelyn released his hand, but she didn't step back. Now I have a question of my own, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to. Okay. If things were different, if we'd met under normal circumstances, if I weren't your boss, if you hadn't just lost your job, would you have actually asked me out? Not for a dare, not for money, just because. Lucas felt his heart rate kick up. This was dangerous territory. Evelyn Ward was powerful, brilliant, and so far out of his league that the question itself felt like a trap. But she'd asked for honesty, and Lucas had already burned every bridge he had. What was one more risk? Yes, he said simply. I would have. Evelyn studied him for a long moment, and Lucas couldn't read her expression at all. Then very quietly she said, Good to know. She got into the SUV, starting the engine. Lucas climbed into the passenger seat and they drove back toward the city in silence. But this time the silence felt different, charged, electric, full of things neither of them was quite ready to say. They were 10 minutes from downtown when Evelyn spoke again. I need you to do something for me. Name it. Stay away from Meridian for the next 48 hours. Don't come to the building. Don't answer emails from company addresses. Don't engage with Calvin or anyone on his team. Let me handle this. You think he'll come after me? I think Calvin is cornered, and cornered men do stupid things. I don't want you anywhere near the fallout until I've secured your position and neutralized the termination. She glanced at him. Can you do that? Stay quiet for 2 days? Lucas thought about his son, about Mrs. Patterson's gentle concern, about the $900 in his bank account that was supposed to last until his next paycheck that would never come. I don't have much choice. You have my word that you'll be made whole, back pay, benefits, and the new position I described. I just need you to trust me. I barely know you, Lucas pointed out. I know, but I kept your secret about the dare yesterday when I could have used it to humiliate you. I'm asking you to return the favor. Lucas nodded slowly. 2 days. Then what? Then I'm going to need you to testify to the board about what you found. In detail, under oath if necessary. Can you do that? Yes. It won't be pleasant. Calvin's lawyers will try to discredit you, question your motives, paint you as unstable or vindictive. Let them, Lucas said. I've got photos, receipts, and the original survey, and I've got nothing left to lose. Evelyn's expression softened just slightly. You have more than you think, Mr. Reed. She pulled up to the public parking lot where Lucas had left his truck. Before he could get out, she reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, writing something on the back. My personal cell, she said, handing it to him. If anything happens, if Calvin contacts you, if you feel threatened, if you need help, you call me immediately, day or night. Lucas took the card, feeling the weight of what she was offering. Trust, protection, an alliance against someone who wanted to destroy him. Why are you doing this? He asked. Really? Evelyn was quiet for a moment, her hands resting on the steering wheel. Because 3 years ago, when my career was falling apart, no one stood with me. No one believed me when I said I'd been lied to. I had to fight alone and it almost broke me. She looked at Lucas. I won't let that happen to you, not when you were brave enough to tell the truth. Lucas got out of the SUV, the morning sun now fully risen, the city coming to life around them. He watched Evelyn drive away, her taillights disappearing into traffic, and felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. He drove home, checking his phone compulsively for messages from Calvin, or from HR, or from anyone else who might have another disaster to drop in his lap. But the only message waiting was from Mrs. Chen, confirming that Jamie had gotten to school safely and was excited about art class. Lucas spent the rest of the morning cleaning the apartment, doing laundry, trying to keep his mind occupied. But every time his phone buzzed, his heart jumped. And when it finally rang at 1:15 p.m., showing Evelyn's number, he answered before the second ring. Lucas Reed. It's Evelyn. Her voice was clipped, professional, the warmth from this morning gone. We have a problem. Lucas's stomach dropped. What kind of problem? The board met an hour ago to review my report. Calvin showed up with his own presentation, photographs, witness statements, a structural engineer who claims the foundation is perfectly sound. That's impossible. We were just there. You saw. I know what I saw, Evelyn interrupted. But Calvin is arguing that you manipulated the evidence, that the photos you provided were from a different site, and that the original geological survey was actually the fake document planted to make him look bad. That's insane. It's also very well rehearsed. He's been preparing for this moment since you first walked into my office. Evelyn's voice dropped. The board is split. Half of them believe me. The other half think this is a vendetta between executives and that you're just a pawn I'm using to take Calvin down. What do you need me to do? Nothing yet. I'm pushing for an independent investigation, bringing in third-party engineers to inspect the site. But that takes time, and Calvin is pushing for a vote of no confidence against me, claiming I've compromised the project with unfounded accusations. Lucas closed his eyes, leaning against the kitchen counter. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to drag you into this. You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose this fight the moment I decided to believe you. She paused. But I need you to be prepared. If the board doesn't side with me, if they determine that I acted recklessly, I could lose my position. And if that happens, Calvin will make sure you never work in this industry again. Then we make sure that doesn't happen. How? Calvin has resources, lawyers, allies on the board. What do we have? Lucas thought about the geological survey, about the photos on his laptop, about the 18 months he'd spent watching Calvin cut corners and bully people and get away with it because no one had the courage or the evidence to stop him. We have the truth, Lucas said, and we have each other. That's more than Calvin has. Evelyn was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, more vulnerable than Lucas had ever heard it. I really hope you're right. 2 days, Lucas said. You told me to stay quiet for 2 days. I'm trusting you. Now you need to trust me. I do, Evelyn said, and Lucas believed her. I'll call you when I know more. And Lucas? Yeah? Thank you. For not running when this got hard. The line went dead. Lucas set down his phone and stared at the business card Evelyn had given him, at the number written in her precise handwriting. He thought about his son at school, about the conference yesterday, about Mrs. Patterson's gentle concern. He thought about Evelyn standing in the rain at Cascade Bay, taking photos of rebar and pilings, choosing to believe him when every logical instinct probably told her not to. And he thought about Calvin Moore, sitting in some conference room right now, spinning lies and building narratives, convinced that money and power and cruelty would win because they always had before. Lucas had 2 days to prove him wrong, 2 days to make sure the truth mattered more than convenience, 2 days to show that sometimes, just sometimes, the man in work boots could stand against the empire and win. He picked up his phone and sent a single text to Evelyn. I'm ready when you are. Her response came 30 seconds later. Good. Because this is about to get much worse before it gets better. Lucas smiled grimly. Worse he could handle. Worse he'd been living with for years. What he couldn't handle was backing down. Not now. Not when he'd finally found someone worth fighting beside. The 48 hours Evelyn had asked for stretched into 72, then 96. 4 days of silence from Meridian, broken only by terse text updates from Evelyn that told Lucas almost nothing and everything at once. Board still divided. Calvin's fighting hard. Stay low. Independent engineers scheduled for Monday. Don't contact anyone. Trust me. This isn't over. Lucas spent those days in a strange kind of purgatory, present in his body, but absent from his life. He made breakfast for Jamie, drove him to school, helped with homework, read bedtime stories. But his mind was always somewhere else, cycling through scenarios, imagining outcomes, waiting for the other shoe to drop. On the fourth night, after Jamie had fallen asleep clutching his one-eyed dinosaur, Lucas sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, reviewing the photos from Cascade Bay for the 100th time. The rebar markings, the piling measurements, the geological surveys, original and modified, laid side by side. The evidence was ironclad. Calvin had committed fraud, endangered lives, and violated every construction regulation that mattered. But evidence only mattered if someone with power was willing to look at it. And right now, that someone was fighting a battle Lucas couldn't see or help with. His phone buzzed at 10:43 p.m. Evelyn's number. Lucas answered immediately. "Tell me." The independent engineers inspected Cascade Bay this afternoon. Evelyn's voice was tight, controlled, but Lucas could hear the exhaustion underneath. "Their preliminary findings support everything you documented. Grade 3 rebar, shortened pilings, soil instability risk. Calvin's structural engineer either lied or never actually visited the site." Relief flooded through Lucas so fast it made him dizzy. "So the board has to believe you now." "You'd think so." Evelyn's laugh was bitter. "But Calvin's lawyers are arguing that the independent team was biased because I selected them. They're demanding a second inspection by engineers Calvin chooses. The board is debating whether to approve it." "That's insane. How many inspections do they need?" "As many as it takes for Calvin to find someone willing to lie for him." She paused, and Lucas heard papers rustling. "But there's something else. Something I didn't see coming." Lucas gripped the phone tighter. "What?" "Calvin filed a defamation lawsuit against you this afternoon. $5 million in damages, claiming you maliciously fabricated evidence to destroy his reputation and career." The words hit Lucas like a physical blow. $5 million. He didn't have $5,000. He barely had $500 after paying rent and utilities this week. "He's trying to scare you," Evelyn continued quickly. "The lawsuit is garbage. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation, and we have the truth. But it's going to tie you up in legal proceedings for months, maybe years. And in the meantime, you can't work in the industry because no one will hire someone with an active lawsuit like this hanging over them." Lucas closed his eyes, feeling the walls closing in. This was Calvin's real play. Not winning in court, but making it so expensive and painful to fight that Lucas would have to give up. "There's more," Evelyn said, and her voice dropped even lower. "He's threatening to subpoena your custody records, claiming that a man unstable enough to commit fraud against his employer is probably unfit to raise a child alone." The rage that tore through Lucas was white-hot and absolute. "He's going after Jamie. He's threatening to. I don't think he'll actually follow through. It's too obviously vindictive, and it would hurt him more than you, but he wants you to know he could. He wants you scared." "I'm not scared," Lucas said, though his hands were shaking. "I'm furious." "Good. Use that." Evelyn's voice sharpened, taking on an edge Lucas hadn't heard before. "Because I need you to do something that's going to feel wrong, but it's the only way we win this." "What?" "I need you to disappear. Not literally, but I need you completely off the grid for the next 3 days. No social media, no emails, no phone calls, except to me. I need Calvin and his lawyers to think you've cracked under the pressure, that you're hiding, that maybe his intimidation tactics worked." "Why?" "Because while they're focused on you, I'm going to be working a different angle. I've got allies on the board, people who've never liked Calvin, who've been waiting for a chance to take him down. But they need cover, plausible deniability. If I'm seen as vindictive or emotional about this, they'll distance themselves to protect their own positions." Lucas frowned. "So you need me to be the villain, the unstable ex-employee making wild accusations?" "For 72 hours, yes. After that, I'm calling an emergency board meeting and putting everything on the table. The independent inspection, the original geological survey, your testimony under oath. But I need time to line up the votes, and I need Calvin feeling confident enough to make mistakes." "And if this doesn't work, if the board sides with him anyway?" Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. "Then we both lose our careers, and Calvin wins. But I'd rather go down fighting beside you than survive by staying silent." The words settled between them, heavy with meaning that went beyond corporate politics and construction fraud. Lucas thought about the woman who'd stood in the rain at Cascade Bay, who'd given him her personal number, who'd asked him why he'd really wanted to ask her out. 3 days.
Lucas said. Then what? Then you come to Meridian Tower Monday morning at 9 a.m., and you tell the board everything. No holding back, no softening the truth. You look them in the eye, and you show them exactly who Calvin Moore is. I can do that. I know you can. Evelyn's voice softened slightly. How's your son? The question caught Lucas off guard. Jamie? He's good. Worried about me, I think, but he's handling it. You haven't told him what's happening. He's 8. He doesn't need to carry this. He's lucky to have you. Evelyn paused. My father was a single parent too. My mother left when I was 6. He worked 3 jobs to keep us fed and housed, and I never once heard him complain or make excuses. Everything I am, every success I've had, it started with him showing me that hard work and integrity matter more than shortcuts. Lucas felt something in his chest tighten. Is he still around? He passed 5 years ago, heart attack at 61, working a night shift he didn't need because he was too proud to let me support him. Her voice caught slightly. I would have given anything to have more time with him.
To tell him that he was right about everything.
I'm sure he knew, Lucas said quietly. Maybe, but I wish I'd said it anyway. She cleared her throat, business mode returning. 3 days, Lucas. Stay safe. I'll contact you Sunday night with final details. Evelyn, Lucas said before she could hang up. Thank you for fighting for this, for me. Thank you for giving me something worth fighting for. The line went dead. Lucas sat in the quiet kitchen, staring at his phone, feeling the weight of everything that was about to happen. 3 more days of waiting. Then one chance to tell the truth and hope it was enough. He checked on Jamie one more time, watching his son sleep with the uncomplicated peace of someone who still believed the world was fundamentally fair. Lucas wanted desperately to protect that innocence, to shield Jamie from the ugliness of what was happening. But he also knew that someday Jamie would be old enough to understand. And when that day came, Lucas wanted his son to know that his father had stood up, had fought back, had chosen truth over convenience even when it cost him everything. That was a legacy worth having. The next 3 days crawled by with agonizing slowness. Lucas kept his word. No emails, no social media, no contact with anyone except Mrs. Chen and Jamie's school. He spent the time cleaning the apartment until it gleamed, organizing closets that didn't need organizing, cooking meals from scratch because it gave his hands something to do. Jamie noticed, of course. On Saturday morning, as they sat eating pancakes Lucas had made from scratch, his son looked up with those 2 perceptive eyes. Dad, are you okay? I'm fine, buddy. Why? You keep checking your phone. And you made pancakes on a Saturday. You only make pancakes when something's wrong. Lucas set down his fork, looking at his son. 8 years old, already reading emotional cues like a book.
Already learning that love meant paying attention. I'm going through something at work, Lucas admitted carefully. Something complicated, but it's going to be okay. Is someone being mean to you? The question was so simple, so direct, that Lucas almost laughed. Yeah, someone is, but I'm handling it. Jamie nodded seriously. You should tell them to stop. Mrs. Patterson says bullies only win if good people don't stand up. Mrs. Patterson is a smart lady. Lucas reached across the table, ruffling his son's hair. And you're right. That's exactly what I'm doing. Good. Jamie returned to his pancakes, satisfied. Can we go to the park later? Absolutely. They spent the afternoon at the park, Jamie running between playground equipment while Lucas sat on a bench, watching clouds roll in from the ocean. The weather forecast called for rain tomorrow, heavy storms moving up the coast. The kind of weather that shut down construction sites and sent workers home early. Lucas's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Enjoy your last weekend of freedom, Reed. Monday, you're done. Calvin? Using a burner phone or someone else's number to get around the no-contact order Evelyn had mentioned. Lucas deleted the message without responding, but the words lingered, poisonous and persistent. Sunday evening, the promised call from Evelyn came at 8:15, right after Jamie's bedtime. It's set, she said without preamble. Emergency board meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. I've got 6 votes confirmed, which is enough to override Calvin's supporters and force an independent audit of all his projects, not just Cascade Bay. What do you need from me? Be at Meridian Tower at 8:30. I'm sending a car to pick you up. Don't argue. This isn't negotiable. You'll testify at 9:15 right after I present the independent inspection report. Bring every piece of evidence you have. Originals, not copies. Done. Lucas. Evelyn's voice shifted, becoming less commander and more human. Calvin's going to come at you hard. His lawyers will try to rattle you, discredit you, make you look unstable or vindictive. You need to stay calm, stick to facts, and remember that every word you say is being recorded for legal purposes. I understand. And if at any point you feel unsafe, if Calvin threatens you, if his people try to intimidate you, you walk straight to me. Don't engage, don't argue, just walk. Understood? Understood. Lucas paused. Are you going to be okay? If this goes sideways, I lose my job and possibly my career. But I've made my peace with that. Some things are more important than a title. She took a breath. The car will be there at 7:45. Wear something professional. This is a board meeting, not a construction site. I don't really own professional clothes. Then wear whatever makes you feel strong. You're not performing for them, Lucas. You're telling the truth. That's all that matters. After they hung up, Lucas stood in his small bedroom, staring at the contents of his closet. 2 pairs of jeans, work pants, 3 button-down shirts he wore to parent-teacher conferences. Nothing that said corporate professional. Nothing that would make the board take him seriously. But Evelyn was right. He wasn't performing. He was telling the truth. He chose dark jeans, a clean white shirt, and a navy jacket he'd bought for his wife's funeral 5 years ago. The boots stayed, scuffed, worn, honest. If the board was going to judge him, they could judge him as he was. Monday morning arrived with the promised rain, fat drops splattering against the windows as Lucas got Jamie ready for school. Mrs. Chen appeared at 7:30 to walk Jamie to the bus stop, giving Lucas a long look that suggested she knew something important was happening. You be careful today, she said in her careful English. Bad men fight dirty when they lose. I will. Thank you for watching out for Jamie. Jamie is good boy. You're a good man. Sometimes that is enough. Lucas hoped she was right. The car Evelyn sent was a black sedan with a driver who didn't make small talk, which suited Lucas fine. They drove through rain-slicked streets, the city gray and blurred until the glass tower of Meridian Development Group rose before them like a monument to everything Lucas had never been part of. The driver pulled up to the executive entrance, where Evelyn waited under an umbrella, wearing a charcoal suit that looked like armor. Ready? She asked as Lucas stepped out. As I'll ever be. They walked into the building together, bypassing the main lobby for a private elevator that required a key card. As the doors closed, Evelyn turned to Lucas. Whatever happens in that room, know that I believe you, I trust you, and I'm grateful you had the courage to speak up. Even if it costs you everything, especially then. She smiled, small and fierce. My father used to say that integrity is what you do when no one's watching, but courage is what you do when everyone is. The elevator opened onto the executive floor, a space Lucas had never seen before. Where the lower floors were all glass and open concept, this level was wood paneling and closed doors, the kind of old-money corporate aesthetic that spoke of power, consolidated, and protected. Evelyn led him to a conference room at the end of the hall. Through the glass walls, Lucas could see the board members already assembled. 12 people, half of them older than his parents would have been, all of them wearing expressions that ranged from curiosity to outright hostility. And at the far end of the table, looking perfectly calm and utterly confident, sat Calvin Moore. He met Lucas's eyes through the glass and smiled. Lucas felt his stomach drop, but he forced himself to breathe, to remember why he was here. Not for himself, not even for his career. For every family that would eventually live in Cascade Bay. For Jamie, who deserved a father who stood up for what was right. Let's do this, he said. Evelyn opened the door. The next 90 minutes were the longest of Lucas's life. Evelyn presented first, methodically walking the board through the independent inspection findings, comparing them to the original specifications and the modified documents Calvin had submitted. Her presentation was precise, devastating, backed by photographs and engineer certifications that left no room for interpretation. Calvin's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman in an expensive suit, countered with questions about bias, about whether the independent engineers had been properly vetted, about why Evelyn had chosen to pursue this investigation without board approval. Then it was Lucas's turn. He stood at the head of the conference table, acutely aware of 12 pairs of eyes studying him, judging him, deciding whether he was worth believing. He laid out the original geological survey, the photographs of the substandard materials, the receipts with altered codes. "Mr. Reed," Calvin's lawyer interrupted, her voice sharp. "You were terminated from Meridian for gross misconduct. Why should this board believe anything you say?" Lucas met her eyes. "Because I have documentation for every claim I'm making. The geological survey is dated and sealed by a licensed engineer. The photographs have metadata showing when and where they were taken. The receipts have vendor signatures. None of that is falsified." "But you have a clear motive to lie," she pressed. "You were fired. You're angry. You want revenge against Mr. Moore." "I don't want revenge," Lucas said quietly. "I want buildings that don't collapse. I want families to be safe. That's all I've ever wanted." One of the board members, an older woman with silver hair, leaned forward. "Mr. Reed, you have a son, correct?" Lucas tensed. "Yes, ma'am." "Would you let him stay in one of the Cascade Bay condos based on what you know about the foundation?" The question hung in the air. Lucas thought about Jamie, about parent-teacher conferences and bedtime stories, and the absolute trust in his son's eyes. "No," he said. "I wouldn't. Not until the foundation is fixed." The woman nodded slowly, sitting back. Calvin finally spoke, his voice smooth and reasonable. "This is all very dramatic, but let's be clear about what's really happening here. Mr. Reed made a series of judgment calls he wasn't qualified to make. When Ms. Ward trusted his accusations over my expertise, she compromised this company's relationship with our contractors and our timeline. The foundation at Cascade Bay is sound. Our original structural engineer confirmed it. The modifications I approved were standard cost-saving measures that in no way compromise safety." "Then you'll have no objection to a third-party structural analysis," Evelyn said coldly. "Paid for by Meridian, conducted by engineers neither you nor I select. State building inspectors, perhaps." Calvin's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. "That's an unnecessary expense." "It's a necessary verification," the silver-haired board member said. "I move that we halt all construction at Cascade Bay pending an independent state inspection of the foundation work." "Seconded," another member said immediately. Calvin's lawyer stood. "This is a witch hunt. You're letting an ex-employee with an axe to grind damage this company's reputation and waste resources on baseless accusations." She was interrupted by a commotion outside the conference room. Raised voices, someone saying they needed to speak to the board immediately. The door burst open. A man Lucas didn't recognize, construction gear, mud-stained boots, face pale with fear, stood in the doorway, breathing hard. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he gasped. "But you need to know, there's been an accident at Cascade Bay. The north wing crane, the storm last night loosened the foundation, and the crane's starting to tip. We've got workers trapped trying to stabilize it, and—" He didn't finish. Every person in the room was already moving. The drive to Cascade Bay took 40 minutes that felt like hours. Lucas rode with Evelyn and 2 board members in one of the company SUVs, nobody speaking, everyone staring at their phones as updates came in from the site. 3 workers trapped, crane tipping at a 15-degree angle, emergency services en route, ground giving way beneath the foundation where the crane was anchored. Exactly where Lucas had said the soil was unstable, exactly where the pilings were too short and the rebar too weak. By the time they arrived, the site was controlled chaos. Emergency vehicles, construction crews shouting instructions, and in the center of it all, a massive crane tilted at a sickening angle, its base sinking slowly into ground that was liquefying under the weight and the rain. Lucas was out of the SUV before it fully stopped, running toward the site office where the project manager was coordinating the response. He could see the crane operator still in the cab, refusing to jump while the machine was unstable. Could see 2 workers on the north wing framework, trapped on a platform that would be crushed if the crane fell. The project manager, a grizzled man named Torres, grabbed Lucas's arm. "Reed, thank God. You know this site better than anyone. The crane's anchored in the north wing foundation. If we don't stabilize it in the next 20 minutes, it's going over." "Get those workers down first," Lucas said. "The platform, we can't reach them. The crane arm is blocking the emergency ladder, and if we try to move it, we'll accelerate the collapse." Lucas's mind raced, pulling up every detail of the foundation layout. every measurement he'd taken. The east piling. It's the only one that's full depth. If we can cable the crane to that point and redistribute the weight, the east piling is 60 feet from where the crane is now. Then we run a cable, heavy gauge steel, anchored to the piling cap and the crane's counterweight. It won't stop the tip, but it'll slow it enough to get those workers down. Torres stared at him. That's insane. Who's going to rig that cable with the ground giving way? Lucas was already moving toward the equipment shed. I am. I built this foundation. I know where every piling is. Reed, you don't work here anymore. Then rehire me for the next 20 minutes. Lucas didn't wait for permission. He grabbed a safety harness, a heavy steel cable, and climbing gear, then ran toward the foundation. Behind him, he could hear Evelyn shouting his name, but he didn't stop. There wasn't time. The rain was coming down harder now, turning the construction site into a mudslide. Lucas clipped his harness to the safety line, then began working his way across the foundation to the east piling. Every step was calculated, remembering which sections were solid and which were compromised. The crane groaned above him, metal screaming as the angle increased another degree. Lucas reached the piling, secured one end of the cable to the reinforced cap, then started the climb toward the crane's counterweight. The steel was slick with rain, the wind whipping at him, but he'd spent years doing exactly this kind of work. His body remembered even when his mind wanted to panic. Halfway up, the ground gave another lurch. The crane tipped another 3 degrees. On the platform above, one of the trapped workers screamed. Lucas forced himself to keep climbing, reached the counterweight, secured the cable with shaking hands, pulling it taut, feeling the crane's weight shift as the cable took up the slack. It wasn't enough. The crane was still tipping, just slower now. Lucas looked down at the foundation, at the pattern of pilings he'd memorized. There was one more anchor point, the southwest corner, where the original specifications had called for triple reinforcement. If they could run a second cable— Reed! Torres's voice through a megaphone. What else do you need? Second cable. Southwest corner piling to the crane base. And get those workers moving now while we've got the weight distributed. The next 10 minutes were a blur of coordinated chaos. Another crew rigged the second cable while rescue workers finally reached the trapped men on the platform. Lucas stayed on the counterweight, manually adjusting the tension as the crane shifted, calling out instructions to Torres based on how the weight was distributing. The crane groaned, settled, held. The trapped workers were brought down safely. The crane operator finally climbed out of the cab, his legs shaking so badly he could barely walk. And Lucas, still perched on the counterweight in the pouring rain, felt something in his chest unclench for the first time in days. He'd saved them, all of them. He climbed down slowly, every muscle screaming, and collapsed onto solid ground. Evelyn was there immediately, along with Torres and half a dozen emergency workers. "You're insane," Torres said, but he was grinning. "Absolutely insane. And you just saved 3 lives." Lucas couldn't speak. He just nodded, breathing hard, feeling the adrenaline start to fade. Evelyn knelt beside him, rain streaming down her face. "Don't you ever do that again? Do you hear me?" "Never." "Had to," Lucas managed. "Couldn't let them die because of something I knew about and didn't fix." She stared at him, and Lucas saw something in her eyes he couldn't quite name. Then she pulled him into a fierce hug, right there in the mud and rain, in front of the emergency crews and the board members and everyone. "You impossible, stubborn, heroic fool," she whispered. Behind them, Calvin Moore stood beside his lawyer and 2 board members, watching the scene unfold. His face was ashen, his confidence shattered, because everyone had just seen the proof. The foundation had failed exactly where Lucas said it would. The crane had tipped exactly as Lucas had predicted, and Lucas had risked his life to save workers endangered by corners Calvin had cut. The silver-haired board member walked over to where Calvin stood. "You're done," she said quietly. "Effective immediately. Security will escort you from the property." Calvin opened his mouth to argue, but she cut him off with a single raised hand. "We have 3 workers who almost died because you falsified safety reports. We have documented evidence of fraud, and we have a man who doesn't even work for this company anymore risking his life to fix your mistakes." She gestured toward Lucas, who was still sitting in the mud. Evelyn beside him. "That's the kind of person we need at Meridian. You are not." Lucas watched as security guards appeared, as Calvin's lawyer tried one last protest before falling silent. Watched as the man who'd tried to destroy him was walked away from the site he'd nearly turned into a graveyard. And he watched as Evelyn turned back to him, offering her hand to pull him up. "Come on," she said. "Let's get you dry. We still have a lot of work to do." Lucas took her hand, letting her pull him to his feet. Around them, the rain continued to fall, washing the mud from the foundation, revealing the truth that had been there all along. The paramedics insisted on checking Lucas over despite his protests. He sat in the back of an ambulance, a thermal blanket wrapped around his shoulders, while a young EMT shined a light in his eyes and asked him questions designed to check for shock or concussion. Through the open doors, Lucas could see the controlled chaos of the construction site transforming into something else. Investigators arriving, news vans pulling up at the perimeter, workers giving statements to people with clipboards. "You're one lucky son of a gun," the EMT said, checking Lucas's vitals one more time. "That cable could have snapped. The crane could have gone over while you were still on it. You could have—" "But I didn't," Lucas interrupted gently. "And 3 people are alive because of it." The EMT nodded, packing up his equipment. "Yeah, I guess that's what matters." He handed Lucas a card. "You'll be sore as hell tomorrow. If you feel dizzy, nauseous, or have trouble breathing, get yourself to an ER. Understand?" "Understood." Lucas climbed out of the ambulance and immediately spotted Evelyn standing near the side office, deep in conversation with Torres and the silver-haired board member. The moment she saw him, she broke away from the group and walked over. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her eyes scanning him as if looking for injuries the paramedics might have missed. "Like I just climbed a crane in a rainstorm," Lucas said. "Which is to say, tired and wet, but alive. The board wants to speak with you. All of them. They're assembling in the side office in 10 minutes. Evelyn's voice dropped lower. "Calvin's been terminated effective immediately. His office is being sealed, his files are being audited, and legal is already preparing charges for fraud and criminal negligence." Lucas absorbed this, feeling something that wasn't quite satisfaction. Calvin had tried to destroy him, had threatened his son, had cut corners that nearly killed 3 people. But watching the man being escorted away in disgrace had felt less like victory and more like exhaustion. "Good," Lucas said simply. "There's something else." Evelyn glanced back at the board members, then stepped closer to Lucas, lowering her voice even further. "The board wants to offer you a position, not the oversight role I mentioned before, something bigger. Director of Safety and Compliance, reporting directly to the CEO. You'd oversee all construction projects, have veto power over any specification changes, and you'd have the authority to halt work on any site you deemed unsafe." Lucas stared at her. That's an executive position." "Yes, it is, with executive salary and benefits." Evelyn's expression was unreadable. "They want someone who'll put safety over politics, someone who's proven they'll stand up to pressure, someone like you." "I don't have an MBA. I don't have a degree at all. I'm a construction worker who got lucky. You're a man who saw a problem and refused to look away, even when it cost you everything. That's not luck, Lucas. That's character." She paused. "They're offering you $300,000 a year to start. Full benefits, signing bonus, company car. Jamie would have the best health care available. You could move out of that apartment into something better." $300,000. Lucas's current salary had been $62,000, and he thought that was more money than he'd ever see. This was transformative, life-changing, the kind of opportunity that didn't come twice. "Why do I feel like there's a catch?" Lucas asked. Evelyn's mouth quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Because you're smart enough to know that nothing in life is free. The catch is that you'll be the youngest executive at Meridian by 15 years. You'll have people who resent your rapid promotion, who'll question your qualifications, who'll be waiting for you to fail so they can say the board made a mistake." "And you?" Lucas asked. "How do you feel about it?" "I recommended you for the position," Evelyn said. "I told the board that if they wanted to rebuild trust and credibility, they needed to start by promoting the person who'd shown more integrity in 2 weeks than most of their executives had shown in years." She met his eyes. "But I also need you to understand what you're walking into. This isn't just a job offer, it's a statement." The board is saying that the old way of doing business, the corner cutting, the politics, the protecting your own, is over. And you're the proof. Lucas looked past her at the construction site, at the crane that had nearly fallen, at the foundation that had almost failed because someone valued profit over safety. He thought about Jamie at school right now, unaware of how close his father had come to not coming home. Thought about all the other kids whose parents worked on construction sites, who trusted that the buildings were safe because someone was supposed to be checking. "I'll do it," Lucas said. "On one condition." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "You're negotiating?" "The foundation at Cascade Bay needs to be completely redone. Not patched, not reinforced, torn out and rebuilt to the original specifications. And every other project Calvin touched needs to be inspected by independent engineers. I want that in writing before I accept the position." For a long moment, Evelyn just looked at him. Then she extended her hand. "I'll make sure the board agrees to those terms. Welcome to the executive team, Mr. Reed." Lucas shook her hand, feeling the surreal nature of the moment. Hours ago, he'd been a terminated employee with no prospects and a lawsuit hanging over his head. Now he was about to become an executive at one of the largest development companies on the West Coast. "One more thing," Evelyn said, not releasing his hand. "The offer I made you before, about asking you out when this was all over, that's off the table now." Lucas felt his stomach drop. "Oh, I understand. The professional boundaries—" "No," Evelyn interrupted. "It's off the table because I'm not asking anymore. I'm telling you. Friday night, 7 p.m., I'm taking you to dinner, not as your boss or your colleague, as a woman who's extremely interested in getting to know the man who just climbed a crane in a thunderstorm to save people he didn't even know." She released his hand, and Lucas saw something in her expression he recognized from the moment in her office 2 weeks ago. Vulnerability, carefully controlled but unmistakably real. "That's not a question," Lucas said carefully. "That's an order. Consider it a strongly worded suggestion." Evelyn's smile was small but genuine. "You can say no if you want, but I really hope you won't." Lucas thought about every reason this was complicated. They'd be working together. She was still technically his superior, even in his new role. The entire company would be watching them, judging them, looking for any sign of impropriety or favoritism. And then he thought about Evelyn standing in the rain at Cascade Bay, choosing to believe him when no one else would. Thought about her fighting the board for him, risking her own career to do what was right. Thought about the way she'd hugged him in the mud like he was something precious that she'd almost lost. "Friday at 7, Lucas said. "I'll be there." The board meeting in the site office was brief and strangely formal, given that they were all standing in a construction trailer that smelled like coffee and damp concrete. The silver-haired woman, who Lucas learned was named Margaret Chen, the board chair, outlined the position, the salary, and the expectations with the kind of crisp efficiency that suggested she'd done this 1,000 times. "You'll start Monday," she said, sliding a folder across the table to Lucas. "This is your offer letter and the compliance terms you requested. We've agreed to full foundation replacement at Cascade Bay and independent inspections of every project Calvin Moore approved or modified in the last 3 years." Lucas opened the folder, scanning the documents. Everything was there, spelled out in precise legal language. The salary, the benefits, the authority to halt construction on safety grounds, the commitment to rebuilding Cascade Bay properly. "There's one additional item," Margaret continued. "Calvin's defamation lawsuit against you has been withdrawn as part of his termination agreement. He's also signed a non-disclosure agreement preventing him from making any public statements about you or this situation. In exchange, we're not pursuing criminal charges at this time, though that may change pending the results of the audits." Lucas looked up sharply. "He gets to walk away?" "He gets to walk away without going to prison," Margaret corrected. "But his reputation in this industry is finished. No development company will hire him after this. His professional certifications are under review, and he's personally liable for any civil damages that result from his actions." She leaned back in her chair. "Sometimes the punishment isn't jail time, Mr. Reed. Sometimes it's watching everything you built crumble while you're powerless to stop it." Lucas nodded slowly, understanding the calculus. Calvin would suffer, just not in the way Lucas might have wanted. But the important thing was that he'd never be in a position to endanger lives again. "I'll need a few days to get things in order before I start," Lucas said. "My son's school, childcare arrangements, finding a new place to live closer to the office." "Take the week," Margaret said. Use the signing bonus to get settled. We'll have an office ready for you when you arrive Monday after next." She stood, extending her hand. "Welcome to Meridian, Director Reed." The title still felt surreal, but Lucas shook her hand and accepted the folder with his future inside it. By the time Lucas left the site office, the rain had finally stopped, leaving the construction site steaming in the weak afternoon sunlight. News crews were still at the perimeter, cameras pointed at the damaged crane, reporters doing stand-ups about the near tragedy and the executive shakeup at Meridian. Evelyn was waiting by her SUV, scrolling through her phone with the distracted intensity of someone fielding 1,000 questions at once. When she saw Lucas, she pocketed the phone and smiled. "Ready to get out of here?" "More than ready," Lucas said. "I need to pick up Jamie from school in an hour." "I'll drive you." Evelyn unlocked the SUV. "We can grab your truck later." They drove back toward the city in comfortable silence, the radio playing something soft and forgettable. Lucas watched the landscape slide past, coastal scrubland giving way to suburbs, suburbs to city proper, and tried to process everything that had happened in the last 6 hours. "You're thinking too hard," Evelyn said without taking her eyes off the road. "I can practically hear the gears turning." "Just trying to figure out how my life changed this fast," Lucas admitted. "A week ago, I was facing unemployment and a lawsuit. Now I'm about to become an executive and go on a date with the most brilliant woman I've ever met." Evelyn's mouth quirked. "Flattery will get you everywhere. But for the record, I'm just as terrified as you are." "Terrified of what?" "Of screwing this up." She glanced at him. "I haven't dated in 3 years. My last relationship ended because he couldn't handle the fact that I made more money than him and had more authority. He needed me to be smaller, quieter, less ambitious. And when I wouldn't do that, he left." "His loss," Lucas said. "That's what my therapist said." Evelyn returned her attention to the road. "But it still hurt, and it made me wonder if maybe I'm just too much for most men. Too driven, too focused, too unwilling to compromise my career for a relationship." Lucas was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I spent 5 years as a single father, working construction jobs and trying to keep a roof over my son's head. And in all that time, I met exactly 3 women who asked me out. One of them stopped calling when she found out about Jamie. The other 2 lost interest when they realized I couldn't afford expensive dinners or weekend getaways." He turned to look at Evelyn. "So I understand being too much or not enough, or whatever variation people use when they mean, 'You're not what I wanted.' But here's what I know. You're not too much. You're exactly who you're supposed to be. And anyone who can't handle that isn't worth your time." Evelyn's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me in a very long time." "It's also the truth." They pulled up outside Jamie's school just as the dismissal bell rang. Lucas started to get out, then paused. "Do you want to meet him?" he asked. "Jamie, I mean, you don't have to, but—" "I'd love to," Evelyn said immediately. Lucas felt something warm settle in his chest. Most of the women who'd expressed interest in him over the years had treated Jamie like an inconvenience, something to be managed or worked around. But Evelyn's response had been instant and genuine. They walked to the pickup area together, joining the cluster of parents waiting for their kids. Lucas spotted Jamie immediately, backpack bouncing as he ran toward the gate, talking animatedly with another boy about something that required elaborate hand gestures. Then Jamie saw Lucas, and his face lit up like the sun breaking through clouds. "Dad!" Jamie crashed into Lucas with the full-body enthusiasm of 8-year-olds everywhere, and Lucas caught him easily, swinging him up for a moment before setting him back down. "Hey, buddy, how was school?" "Good. We had art today, and I made a volcano out of paper mache, and it's going to erupt on Friday when it's dry, and Mrs. Patterson said it's the best one in the class." The words tumbled out in a breathless rush. Then Jamie noticed Evelyn standing beside Lucas and went quiet, suddenly shy. "Jamie, this is Ms. Ward. She works with me." Evelyn crouched down so she was at Jamie's eye level, extending her hand with the same seriousness she'd shown in the boardroom. "It's very nice to meet you, Jamie. Your dad has told me a lot about you." Jamie shook her hand solemnly. "He has?" "He has. He says you're very good at math and that you like dinosaurs." "I love dinosaurs," Jamie corrected, "especially velociraptors.
Did you know they were actually about the size of a turkey, but they hunted in packs and had really sharp claws? I did not know that, Evelyn said, perfectly serious. That's fascinating. Lucas watched the interaction, feeling something shift in his chest. Evelyn wasn't talking down to Jamie or pretending to be interested. She was engaging with him the way adults should engage with kids, with respect and genuine curiosity. Ms. Ward helped me with something important at work today, Lucas said, resting a hand on Jamie's shoulder. I wanted you to meet her. Jamie studied Evelyn with the frank assessment of childhood. Are you my dad's boss? We work together, Evelyn said. Though your dad just got a new job that makes him my equal. Oh, Jamie processed this. Are you going to have dinner with us? The question caught both adults off guard. Lucas started to say that Miss Ward was probably busy, but Evelyn spoke first. Not tonight, she said gently, but maybe another time if that's okay with you. Jamie shrugged, the way kids do when they've already moved on to the next thought. Okay, Dad, can we get ice cream? I got 100% on my spelling test. Did you? Lucas grinned. Then yeah, ice cream is definitely happening. Say goodbye to Miss Ward. Bye, Miss Ward. Goodbye, Jamie. Congratulations on your spelling test. They walked back to Evelyn's SUV, Jamie chattering about school and volcanoes and the ice cream flavor he wanted. Evelyn drove them to the ice cream shop near their apartment, then insisted on buying Jamie's cone despite Lucas's protests. As they stood outside the shop, Jamie working his way through a towering scoop of chocolate chip cookie dough, Evelyn turned to Lucas. He's wonderful, she said quietly. You've done an amazing job with him. Thanks. It hasn't been easy, but he makes it worth it. I can tell. Evelyn checked her watch. I should get back to the office. The board wants hourly updates on the Cascade Bay situation, and I've got about 17 calls to return. Before you go, Lucas said, pulling out his phone, can I have your actual number, not just the work one? Evelyn smiled, rattling off her cell. Lucas saved it, then sent her a quick text so she'd have his. This is Lucas. Thanks for everything today. See you Friday at 7. Her phone buzzed and she glanced at it, then back at him. Friday at 7. Don't be late, Director Reed. She walked back to her SUV, and Lucas watched her drive away before turning to Jamie, who was now covered in melted ice cream and grinning. I like her, Jamie announced. She's nice, and she knows about dinosaurs. She is nice, Lucas agreed. Come on, let's get you cleaned up and head home. That evening, after Jamie was in bed, Lucas sat at the kitchen table with the offer letter from Meridian spread in front of him. $300,000 a year, full health care. A signing bonus that would let him move into a better neighborhood, maybe even buy a small house. He thought about calling his ex-wife, telling her that the man she'd left because he couldn't provide enough was now about to become an executive. But the impulse faded quickly. She'd made her choice 5 years ago, and Lucas had built a life without her, a good life, one centered around his son and his values. Instead, he pulled out his phone and sent a text to Mrs. Chen next door. I got a new job, a really good one. Thank you for always believing in us. Her response came 30 seconds later. I told you. Good man, good father. The universe rewards this. I am very happy for you. Lucas smiled, feeling the weight of the last 2 weeks finally starting to lift. There would be challenges ahead, learning a new role, proving himself to skeptical colleagues, navigating whatever was developing between him and Evelyn. But for the first time in a long time, Lucas felt like he was moving towards something instead of just running from disaster. His phone buzzed with a text from Evelyn. The board just approved full reconstruction of Cascade Bay. Groundbreaking on new foundation starts next week. You were right about everything. Thank you for not giving up. Lucas typed back quickly. Thank you for believing me when you had every reason not to. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I have good instincts about people, and you're one of the best people I've ever met. Sleep well, Lucas. You've earned it. Lucas set down his phone and walked to Jamie's room, checking on his son one more time. Jamie was sprawled across his bed, one arm wrapped around his dinosaur, face peaceful in sleep. We're going to be okay, Lucas whispered into the darkness. Better than okay. The next week passed in a blur of logistics and preparations. Lucas met with HR to finalize his employment paperwork, signed a lease on a 2-bedroom apartment in a better school district,
and broke the news to Jamie that they were moving. His son had taken it with the resilience of childhood, mainly concerned about whether his new room would be big enough for his dinosaur collection. Lucas also spent hours on the phone with Margaret Chen and the legal team, reviewing the audit findings from Calvin's projects. The damage was extensive, not just Cascade Bay, but 3 other developments where specifications had been altered, materials downgraded, inspections bypassed. The repairs would cost Meridian tens of millions of dollars and take months to complete. But the alternative, buildings that failed, families endangered, lives lost, was incalculable. On Thursday evening, Lucas stood in his new apartment, surrounded by boxes that still needed unpacking, when his phone rang. Evelyn's number. "Tell me you didn't forget about tomorrow night," she said without preamble. 7 p.m., not a second late, Lucas confirmed. "Where are we going?" "It's a surprise. Wear something nice but comfortable." "And Lucas?" Her voice softened. "I'm really looking forward to this." "Me too," Lucas said, and meant it. After they hung up, Lucas attacked his closet with renewed purpose, trying to assemble an outfit that said professional but approachable. He finally settled on dark slacks, a button-down shirt, and the same navy jacket he'd worn to the board meeting. Friday morning, Lucas took Jamie to his new school, walking him through the registration process and introducing him to his new third-grade teacher, Mr. Harrison. Jamie was nervous but excited, already making friends with a kid who also loved dinosaurs. "You'll do great," Lucas told his son as the morning bell rang, "and I'll be right here at 3 to pick you up." "Promise?" Jamie asked, the way he always did. "Promise," Lucas said, the way he always did. The rest of the day dragged with agonizing slowness. Lucas tried to work on unpacking, reviewing the materials Margaret had sent him for his new position, returning calls from well-wishers who'd heard about his promotion. But his mind kept drifting to the evening ahead, to Evelyn, to the fact that this was the first real date he'd been on in 5 years. At 5:30, Lucas started getting ready. By 6, he was pacing the apartment, checking his reflection every few minutes, wondering if he should have gotten a haircut or if the shirt was too casual or if he was overthinking everything. His phone buzzed at 6:45. "I'm outside. Take your time." Lucas grabbed his wallet and keys, checked on Jamie one more time. Mrs. Chen had agreed to babysit, and headed downstairs. Evelyn stood beside her SUV, and Lucas stopped breathing for a moment. She wore a deep blue dress that somehow managed to be elegant without being formal, her hair down for the first time since he'd met her, framing her face in soft waves. "Hi," she said, suddenly seeming as nervous as Lucas felt. "Hi," Lucas managed. "You look incredible." "So do you." She smiled, gesturing to the passenger door. "Ready?" Lucas climbed in and Evelyn drove them through the city as the sun set, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. They made small talk, safe topics, easy topics, the verbal equivalent of circling each other. Finally, Evelyn pulled up to a restaurant Lucas had heard of but never imagined visiting. A small Italian place on the waterfront, the kind of establishment that didn't advertise because people who knew. Inside, the lighting was soft and warm, the tables spaced far enough apart for privacy. The hostess greeted Evelyn by name and led them to a corner table overlooking the water. "How did you get a reservation here?" Lucas asked as they sat down. "I heard there's a 3-month waiting list." "I know the owner," Evelyn said. "We went to college together. She owes me a favor from when I helped her navigate a commercial property lease." A waiter appeared with wine, pouring 2 glasses without being asked. Evelyn raised hers slightly. "To new beginnings," she said, "and to the bravest man I know." Lucas touched his glass to hers, the crystal ringing softly. "To the woman who took a chance on a guy in work boots." They drank, and Lucas tasted something expensive and complex that probably cost more than his weekly grocery budget used to. "So," Evelyn said, setting down her glass, "tell me something I don't know about you. Something that's not in your employee file or the board reports." Lucas thought for a moment. "I wanted to be an architect when I was younger. Drew buildings constantly, spent hours sketching designs for houses I'd probably never live in. But college wasn't an option. My family couldn't afford it, and I needed to work. So I went into construction instead, figured I'd at least be building things even if I wasn't designing them." "Do you still draw?"
Evelyn asked. Sometimes. Usually late at night when Jamie's asleep and the apartment's quiet. Nothing serious, just ideas. I'd like to see them sometime. Evelyn's expression was genuinely interested. Your turn. Ask me something. Why development? Lucas asked. You could have done anything. Law, finance, politics. Why choose this industry? Evelyn was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the stem of her wine glass. My father was a maintenance worker at a commercial building downtown. Spent 30 years mopping floors and fixing leaky pipes and keeping everything running. And every day he'd come home and tell me stories about the people who worked in that building, the executives, the lawyers, the decision makers. He'd say, Evelyn, those people shape the world. They decide what gets built, where people live, how cities grow. She looked up, meeting Lucas's eyes. He never got to be one of those people. But he made damn sure I could be. Put every extra dollar into my education, sacrificed everything so I'd have opportunities he never had. When I graduated with my MBA and got my first position in development, he cried. Told me he was proud. Her voice caught slightly. He died 6 months later. Heart attack at work, in the building he'd spent his whole life maintaining. Lucas reached across the table, covering her hand with his. He'd be incredibly proud of who you've become. I hope so. Evelyn squeezed his hand, then gently withdrew hers as the waiter appeared with menus. I hope he'd be proud that I'm trying to build things that matter, that last, that make people's lives better. They ordered. Lucas trusted Evelyn's recommendations entirely and fell into easier conversation as the evening progressed. They talked about Jamie's fascination with dinosaurs, about Evelyn's brief and disastrous attempt to learn piano, about Lucas's small collection of vintage architecture books that he'd been accumulating since high school. The food was extraordinary, each course a small work of art that tasted even better than it looked. But Lucas found himself paying more attention to Evelyn. The way she laughed at his stories about construction site mishaps, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about projects she'd successfully completed, the way she seemed genuinely interested in every word he said. Halfway through dinner, Lucas realized something that made his chest tight. He was falling for her. Not the surface attraction he'd felt when he first saw her in that glass office, but something deeper. He was falling for her intelligence, her passion, her willingness to fight for what was right, even when it cost her. You're staring, Evelyn said, a smile playing at her lips. Sorry, Lucas said, not feeling sorry at all. Just thinking about how different things could have been. If Calvin's dare had actually been just a dare. If I'd walked into your office and asked you out without mentioning Cascade Bay. You want to know what I would have said? Evelyn asked. I do. She leaned back in her chair, studying him. I would have said no. Not because I wasn't interested. I noticed you long before you walked into my office, by the way. But because you would have been just another guy shooting his shot, and I'm tired of being treated like a prize to be won. And now? Lucas asked quietly. Now I know who you are. I know you're honest and brave and willing to risk everything for what you believe in. I know you're a good father who puts his son first. I know you're the kind of man who climbs a crane in a thunderstorm to save strangers. She paused. So if you asked me now, the answer would be yes. Lucas felt his heart rate kick up. Evelyn Ward, would you like to go on a second date with me? She laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Yes, Lucas Reed, I absolutely would. They finished dinner lingering over coffee and tiramisu, neither of them in a hurry for the evening to end. When the check came, Evelyn insisted on paying despite Lucas's protests. You can get the next one, she said, when you've had time to cash your signing bonus. Deal. They drove back to Lucas's apartment slowly, the city quiet around them, the radio playing something soft and forgettable. When Evelyn pulled up outside his building, Lucas didn't immediately get out. Thank you, he said, for tonight, for everything this week, for believing in me when you had no reason to. I had every reason to, Evelyn said. You just couldn't see it yet. Lucas knew he should get out of the car, should say goodnight, go inside, let the evening end on a perfect note. But sitting there in the quiet darkness with Evelyn beside him, he found himself unable to move. Can I ask you something? He said finally. Anything. Are we really doing this? You and me? Evelyn turned to face him fully. I don't know what this becomes.
I don't have a roadmap or a plan, but I know I want to find out. If you do. Lucas reached over and took her hand, feeling her fingers curl around his. I do, but I need you to know Jamie comes first, always. I won't apologize for that. I wouldn't want you to, Evelyn said. The fact that you're a devoted father is one of the things I admire most about you. I'm not asking you to choose between your son and me, Lucas. I'm asking if there's room in your life for both of us. There is, Lucas said. Absolutely there is. Evelyn smiled, and in the dim light from the street lamp, Lucas thought she'd never looked more beautiful. Then I guess we're really doing this. She leaned across the console, and Lucas met her halfway, their lips touching in a kiss that was gentle and searching and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. I should go, Lucas said reluctantly. Early morning tomorrow, Jamie has soccer tryouts. And I have a meeting with the structural engineers about Cascade Bay. Evelyn squeezed his hand one more time before releasing it. But I'll call you this weekend. Maybe we can do this again soon. I'd like that. Lucas climbed out of the SUV and watched Evelyn drive away, her taillights disappearing into the night. Then he walked upstairs to his new apartment, where Mrs. Chen reported that Jamie had been an angel and was now sound asleep. After she left, Lucas checked on his son, then stood in the quiet living room, surrounded by boxes that still needed unpacking, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Complete. The weekend passed in a haze of normalcy that felt almost surreal after the chaos of the previous weeks. Lucas took Jamie to soccer tryouts Saturday morning, watching his son run drills with the kind of unbridled enthusiasm that made other parents smile. Evelyn called Saturday evening, and they talked for 2 hours about nothing important: favorite movies, childhood memories, the kind of easy conversation that built foundations stronger than concrete and steel. Sunday, Lucas finished unpacking the last of the boxes, transforming the apartment from a collection of cardboard and chaos into something that actually felt like home. Jamie claimed the larger bedroom, immediately covering one wall with dinosaur posters and arranging his stuffed animals in what he insisted was scientific order by geological period. This is the best room I've ever had, Jamie announced, standing in the doorway with his hands on his hips like a tiny landlord surveying his kingdom. Yeah, Lucas said, adjusting a poster of a Tyrannosaurus Rex that was slightly crooked. You like the new place? I love it. And the school is really cool. Mr. Harrison said we're doing a project on the solar system next month, and I can pick any planet I want. Jamie paused, then added carefully, Are we staying here? Like, for a long time? The question hit Lucas harder than it should have. They'd moved 4 times in the last 5 years, always chasing cheaper rent or better school districts or neighborhoods where Lucas felt safer leaving Jamie with sitters. Stability had been a luxury they couldn't afford. Yeah, buddy, Lucas said, kneeling down so they were eye level. We're staying here. This is home now. Jamie's face split into a grin so wide it made Lucas's chest ache. Good. Because I already told Marcus from school that he could come over and see my dinosaur collection. Then we'd better make sure everything's perfect for visitors, Lucas said, standing up and ruffling his son's hair. That evening, after Jamie was asleep, Lucas sat at the small desk in his own bedroom, barely more than a table and a chair, but it was his, and opened his laptop. The email from Margaret Chen had arrived that afternoon, containing his official start date, office location, and a preliminary list of projects that would fall under his oversight. 23 active construction sites across 3 states, budgets ranging from $12 million to over $200 million, hundreds of workers, thousands of future residents, all depending on someone making sure the buildings were safe. The responsibility should have terrified him. Instead, Lucas felt something closer to purpose. His phone buzzed with a text from Evelyn. How's the new place? Lucas smiled, typing back. Officially unpacked. Jamie loves his room. I think we're going to be happy here. I'm glad. I've been thinking about you all weekend. Good thoughts, I hope. The best kind. I can't stop replaying Friday night. When can I see you again? Lucas glanced at his calendar, mentally calculating childcare and Jamie's schedule. Tuesday evening? Jamie has art class until 6. I could meet you after. Perfect. My place this time. I'll cook. You cook? Don't sound so surprised. I'm actually quite good at it. 7 p.m.? I'll be there. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn clarity that made everything feel possible. Lucas dropped Jamie at school, watching his son run toward a group of kids who were already calling his name, and felt a surge of gratitude so strong it was almost painful. 6 months ago, Jamie had been the new kid who ate lunch alone. Now he had friends, a stable home, a father who wasn't constantly stressed about making rent. Lucas drove to Meridian Tower, parking in the executive garage with an access card that still felt like it belonged to someone else. The building looked different in morning light, less intimidating, more like a place where actual work happened instead of a glass monument to corporate power. Margaret Chen met him in the lobby, extending a hand that Lucas shook firmly. "Welcome to your first day, Director Reed. Ready to change some lives?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Lucas said. His office was on the same floor as Evelyn's, 3 doors down from the corner suite she occupied. It was smaller than hers, but still larger than any workspace Lucas had ever had. Windows overlooking the city, a desk that wasn't particle board, actual artwork on the walls. "Your assistant starts tomorrow," Margaret said, gesturing to the empty desk outside his office. "Her name is Sandra Chen, no relation, and she's been with Meridian for 12 years. She knows everyone, remembers everything, and will keep you organized whether you like it or not." "Sounds perfect," Lucas said. "Your first priority is the Cascade Bay reconstruction oversight. The demolition team breaks ground on the old foundation Wednesday morning, and I want you on site to ensure everything's done properly. After that, you'll begin the audit reviews of Calvin's other projects." Margaret handed him a tablet loaded with files. "This is everything we've compiled so far. It's not pretty." Lucas scrolled through the documents, his stomach sinking with each page. Altered specifications, downgraded materials, bypassed inspections. The pattern repeated across nearly every project Calvin had touched. "How did this go unnoticed for so long?" Lucas asked. Margaret's expression hardened. "Because people trusted him. Because he delivered projects under budget and ahead of schedule, which made the board happy. And because anyone who questioned his methods was either reassigned or terminated before they could make noise." She paused. "We failed, Lucas. The board, the executive team, everyone who should have been watching. We let someone prioritize profit over safety, and it almost got people killed." "But it didn't," Lucas said quietly. "We caught it in time. Because you spoke up when it would have been easier to stay silent. Don't think that's lost on anyone here." Margaret checked her watch. "I've got a meeting in 10 minutes, but Evelyn wanted to see you when you arrived. She's in her office." Lucas walked the short distance to Evelyn's corner suite, knocked once, and entered when she called out. She was standing at her desk, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing emphatically at something on her monitor. When she saw Lucas, her expression shifted from intense concentration to something warmer, more personal. She held up one finger. "Give me a minute." And Lucas nodded, settling into one of the chairs facing her desk. "I don't care what the contractor says," Evelyn said into the phone, her voice sharp. "The environmental impact study required mitigation measures that weren't included in the final plans. Either they revise the submission or we pull the permit. Those are the options." She listened for a moment. "Good. I expect the revised plans by end of business Wednesday." She hung up and immediately walked around the desk, surprising Lucas by pulling him into a brief but fierce hug. "I'm so glad you're here," she said, stepping back. "Really here, officially, with an office and everything." "Me too," Lucas said, "though I'm still not entirely sure I know what I'm doing." "None of us do, not really. We just make the best decisions we can with the information we have and hope it's enough." Evelyn returned to her chair, gesturing for Lucas to sit. "Margaret gave you the Cascade Bay assignment?" "She did. I'm on site Wednesday for the demolition." "I want to be there too. This whole situation started because I didn't catch Calvin's fraud soon enough. I need to see it through." She paused, her expression softening. "And I want to see you work. See you in your element." Lucas smiled. "My element is currently mud and heavy machinery, so dress accordingly." "I can handle mud." Evelyn's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it with a frown. "Speaking of which, the legal team wants to brief us on Calvin's settlement terms. They're concerned he might try to violate the NDA." "What could he possibly gain from that?" "Revenge. Some people would rather burn everything down than admit they were wrong." She stood again, gathering her tablet and a folder. Come on, let's go hear what legal has to say. The meeting lasted 90 minutes and left Lucas feeling like he needed a shower. Calvin's lawyers were pushing back on nearly every term of the settlement, trying to reduce his financial liability and loosen the non-disclosure restrictions. The company's legal team was holding firm, but the tension was palpable. "He's going to be a problem," Evelyn said as they walked back to their offices afterward. "Even terminated and disgraced, he's going to try to hurt us." "Let him try," Lucas said. "We have the truth. That's more than he's got." Evelyn stopped outside her office, studying Lucas with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You really believe that, don't you? That truth is enough." "Don't you?" "I want to." She reached out, touching his arm briefly. "You make me want to believe a lot of things I'd stopped hoping for." Before Lucas could respond, his phone rang. Jamie's school. His stomach dropped. Calls during school hours were never good news. "I need to take this," he said, and Evelyn nodded, stepping into her office to give him privacy. "This is Lucas Reed." "Mr. Reed, this is Principal Morrison. Jamie's fine, but there's been an incident we need to discuss. Can you come to the school?" Lucas's mind immediately jumped to worst-case scenarios, injuries, fights, something terrible. "What kind of incident?" "Nothing serious, I promise, but I'd rather discuss it in person. Can you be here in the next hour?" "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Lucas knocked on Evelyn's door, explaining the situation. She waved away his apology before he could even finish. "Family comes first, always. Go take care of Jamie. We'll catch up later." The drive to Jamie's school felt like the longest 20 minutes of Lucas's life. He parked in the visitor lot and practically ran to the main office, where Principal Morrison, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, was waiting. "Mr. Reed, thank you for coming so quickly. Please, have a seat." Lucas sat, his heart pounding. "Is Jamie hurt? Did something happen?" "Jamie's physically fine. He's in Mr. Harrison's classroom right now, finishing his math work." Principal Morrison folded her hands on her desk. "But we had a situation during recess today. Another student, a fifth grader named Tyler, was bullying one of Jamie's classmates, pushing him, calling him names, the usual playground cruelty. Jamie intervened." "Intervened how?" Lucas asked carefully. "He stood between Tyler and the other boy and told Tyler to stop. When Tyler didn't, Jamie apparently said, and I quote, 'My dad says bullies only win when good people don't stand up. I'm standing up now.'" Lucas felt something warm bloom in his chest. That's what I taught him." "Which is admirable. The problem is that Tyler then shoved Jamie, and Jamie shoved back, hard enough that Tyler fell down." Principal Morrison's expression was carefully neutral. "We have a zero-tolerance policy on physical altercation. Technically, I should suspend both boys." "But," Lucas said, hearing the unspoken word, "but 3 other students confirmed that Jamie was defending someone else and only used physical force after being attacked first. And Tyler has a documented history of bullying behavior that we've been addressing with his parents." She leaned back in her chair. "So instead of suspension, both boys are getting lunch detention for a week, and Tyler's parents are being called in for another conference about his behavior." Lucas felt relief wash over him. "That seems fair. Mr. Reed, I need to ask, is everything okay at home? Jamie seems anxious lately, not in a concerning way, but his teacher noticed he's been asking a lot of questions about whether things are permanent." "We just moved to a new apartment," Lucas explained. "Better neighborhood, better school district. But it's the 4th move in 5 years, and I think Jamie's worried it's temporary." "That makes sense. Children crave stability." Principal Morrison smiled. "For what it's worth, Jamie's a wonderful kid. Smart, kind, brave enough to stand up for others. You should be very proud." "I am," Lucas said. "Every single day." He met with Mr. Harrison briefly, then found Jamie sitting in the classroom working on multiplication tables, his expression anxious until he saw his father. "Am I in trouble?" Jamie asked quietly. Lucas knelt beside his son's desk. "You're in lunch detention for a week, which means you made a choice that had consequences. But I'm not angry, buddy. You stood up for someone who needed help. That took courage." "Tyler was being really mean to Marcus, and Marcus was crying. Then you did the right thing." Lucas paused, choosing his words carefully. "But next time, try to get a teacher first before it gets physical, okay?"
Fighting should always be the last option, not the first. Jamie nodded seriously. Okay, Dad. I will. Lucas drove back to Meridian with Jamie's words echoing in his head. My dad says bullies only win when good people don't stand up. It was a lesson Lucas had learned the hard way over the past few weeks, and apparently he'd taught it well enough that his 8-year-old son was already putting it into practice. When Lucas returned to his office, he found a note on his desk in Evelyn's precise handwriting. Hope everything's okay with Jamie. I'm in meetings until 5, but I wanted you to know tomorrow night is still on. I'm making chicken piccata, and I expect you to be impressed. Lucas smiled, tucking the note into his desk drawer like something precious. The rest of Monday and Tuesday passed in a blur of meetings, document reviews, and crash courses in corporate protocols Lucas had never needed to know before. He met his assistant, Sandra, who took one look at his disorganized filing system and immediately began restructuring everything with terrifying efficiency. You're a builder, not an administrator, she said kindly but firmly. Let me handle the paperwork. You focus on keeping people safe. Tuesday evening, Lucas dropped Jamie at art class and drove to the address Evelyn had texted him, a modern condo building overlooking the water, the kind of place that had a doorman and an actual lobby instead of a buzzer system. Evelyn buzzed him up to the 8th floor, and when Lucas knocked on her door, she answered wearing jeans and a casual sweater, her hair pulled back, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. Welcome to my humble home, she said, stepping aside to let him in. The condo was beautiful but surprisingly modest, open floor plan, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the harbor, furniture that was comfortable rather than showy. And everywhere Lucas looked, there were books. Shelves of them, stacks on tables, even a few piled beside the couch. You really like to read, Lucas said. It's either books or cats, and I travel too much for cats. Evelyn led him to the kitchen, where something smelled absolutely incredible. Wine? Please. They talked while Evelyn finished cooking, falling into the same easy rhythm they'd found at dinner Friday night. Lucas told her about Jamie's playground incident, and Evelyn shared a story about the time she'd gotten detention in high school for arguing with a teacher about the mathematical probability of evolution. You argued about evolution in high school? Lucas asked, accepting the plate she handed him. Catholic school, conservative teacher, teenage Evelyn who'd just discovered Richard Dawkins. She grinned. It did not go well. My father had to come pick me up from the principal's office, and he spent the whole drive home trying not to laugh. They ate at her small dining table, the city lights twinkling below them, and Lucas felt something settle in his chest that he hadn't even realized was unsettled. This, sitting across from a brilliant woman who made him laugh, eating food that tasted like love translated into lemon and butter, being seen and valued for who he actually was, this was what he'd stopped letting himself hope for. You're quiet, Evelyn said, refilling his wine glass. Just thinking about how different my life is now compared to 3 weeks ago. Good different or scary different? Both, Lucas admitted. 3 weeks ago, I was a construction worker trying to keep his head above water. Now I'm an executive sitting in a beautiful condo on a date with a woman who terrifies and amazes me in equal measure. Evelyn's smile was soft. I don't want to terrify you. You don't. Not in a bad way. Lucas set down his wine glass, meeting her eyes. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared of screwing this up. Of not being enough or being too much or just failing at something that matters this much. Lucas, Evelyn reached across the table, taking his hand. I've watched you stand up to a powerful executive when it could have cost you everything. I've watched you risk your life to save strangers. I've watched you be a devoted father and an honest man even when honesty was expensive. If that's what you're like at your worst, I'm not worried about your best. Lucas squeezed her hand, feeling the truth of her words settle into his bones. Can I ask you something? Anything. What do you want this to be? Us, I mean. Evelyn was quiet for a moment, her thumb tracing circles on the back of his hand. I want it to be real. I want to know that when you're with me, it's because you want to be, not because you feel obligated or because I'm your boss or any other reason except that you chose this. She paused. I've had too many relationships built on convenience or status or what someone thought they should want. I'm tired of that. I want something honest. I can give you honest, Lucas said. That's pretty much all I've got.
It's more than enough. Evelyn stood, pulling Lucas up with her. Come here. She led him to the couch, and they settled in together, Evelyn tucked against Lucas's side, both of them looking out at the harbor lights. For a long time, they just sat in comfortable silence, and Lucas thought about how rare this was, being with someone who didn't need him to perform or prove or pretend. Jamie asked me if you were my girlfriend, Lucas said eventually. Evelyn turned her head to look up at him. What did you tell him? I told him I wasn't sure yet, but that I hoped so. Lucas smiled. He said that was okay, as long as you keep knowing about dinosaurs. I've been doing research, Evelyn admitted. Did you know Stegosaurus had a brain the size of a walnut, but plates that could regulate its body temperature? Lucas laughed, pulling her closer. You've been studying dinosaur facts? I want to be able to talk to your son about things that matter to him. Is that weird? It's perfect, Lucas said honestly. They stayed like that until Lucas's phone alarm reminded him he needed to pick up Jamie from art class. Evelyn walked him to the door, and they stood in her hallway, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Wednesday at Cascade Bay, Evelyn said. 7 a.m.? I'll meet you there. She kissed him, slow and sweet, and Lucas felt it all the way down to his work boots. Wednesday morning dawned gray and cold, the kind of weather that made construction workers grumble and reach for extra coffee. Lucas arrived at Cascade Bay at 6:30 to find the demolition crew already assembling, heavy equipment lined up like metal dinosaurs preparing for war. Evelyn pulled up 10 minutes later in work clothes and boots that were clearly brand new, her hair braided back, looking ready for battle. You weren't kidding about the mud, she said, surveying the site. It gets worse when the rain starts. Lucas handed her a hard hat and safety vest. But you'll want these regardless. The demolition took 3 hours. Lucas supervised every step, checking and rechecking measurements, ensuring the crew marked utility lines correctly, making sure everyone stayed clear of the areas where the foundation was most compromised. When the first excavator finally bit into the substandard concrete, revealing the too short pilings and inadequate rebar, several of the crew members whistled in dismay. That would have failed within a year, one of them said to Lucas. Maybe less. You saved lives, man. Evelyn heard it too. She caught Lucas's eye across the site, and he saw pride there and something deeper. By noon, the old foundation was rubble, and the crew was prepping for the new pour that would begin next week. Proper depth, proper materials, built to last. It's done, Evelyn said, standing beside Lucas as they watched the cleanup crew work. The right way this time. Yeah, Lucas said. It is. They grabbed lunch at a food truck near the site, eating tacos while sitting on the tailgate of Lucas's truck, and talked about the other projects on the audit list, about timelines and budgets and all the practical details that came with fixing what Calvin had broken. It's going to take months, Evelyn said. Maybe a year to fully correct everything. Then we take a year, Lucas said. Better that than cutting corners and hoping no one notices. Evelyn smiled, bumping her shoulder against his. I really like the way you think, Director Reed. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Lucas worked his new position, traveling to construction sites, reviewing documentation, slowly building a reputation as the executive who actually understood construction because he'd done it himself. Jamie thrived in his new school, making friends and bringing home art projects that Lucas dutifully displayed on the refrigerator. And Evelyn became a constant presence in their lives. Not intrusive, not trying to replace anyone, just genuinely interested in being part of what Lucas and Jamie had built together. She came to Jamie's soccer game and cheered louder than any parent there. She brought Lucas coffee when he was buried in audit reports. She kissed him in her office after everyone else had gone home, and slowly, carefully, they built something that felt solid and real. 8 weeks after Calvin's termination, the board held a special meeting to review the audit findings and approve the corrective action plan Lucas had developed. The costs were staggering, $47 million in repairs, replacements, and settlements. But the alternative, buildings that failed, lawsuits, destroyed reputations, would have cost infinitely more. Margaret Chen stood at the head of the conference table looking at each board member in turn. This is expensive, she said bluntly. It's going to hurt our quarterly numbers and delay several projects. But it's also the right thing to do. We failed in our oversight, and people almost died because of it. I move that we approve Director Reed's plan in full and commit publicly to the highest safety standards in the industry. The vote was unanimous. Afterward, as the board members filed out, Margaret pulled Lucas aside. You've done exceptional work these past 2 months. The board wanted you to know we're grateful, and we're committed to supporting your vision for this department. She paused. There's also a matter of your compensation. Given your expanded responsibilities and the value you've brought to the company, we're adjusting your salary to $400,000 annually, effective immediately. Lucas stared at her. That's incredibly generous. It's appropriate, Margaret corrected. You've earned it. Use it well. That evening, Lucas picked up Jamie from school and drove them to the waterfront park, where Evelyn was waiting on a bench overlooking the harbor. Jamie ran ahead, already telling her about the science project he'd aced, and Lucas watched them together, his son and this woman who'd somehow become essential to his life, and felt gratitude so overwhelming he had to stop walking. Evelyn looked up, saw his expression, and smiled. You okay? She called. Yeah, Lucas said, walking toward them. I really am. 3 months after that first dare, Meridian Development Group held a gala celebrating the completion of the Cascade Bay renovation. The resort had reopened with a foundation that would last 100 years, built the right way, safe for the families who would visit and live there. Lucas stood in the ballroom wearing a suit that actually fit, Jamie beside him in a miniature version looking unbearably proud, watching Evelyn give a speech about integrity and safety and the importance of doing right even when it cost more. When she finished, the crowd applauded, and she made her way through the room until she reached Lucas and Jamie. Great speech, Lucas said. I had a good inspiration, Evelyn replied, then turned to Jamie. You look very handsome tonight, Mr. Reed. Thank you, Jamie said formally. You look pretty too. Dad says you always do, but tonight you're extra pretty. Evelyn's eyes met Lucas's, sparkling with amusement. He says that, does he? Every day, Jamie confirmed cheerfully. Can I go see the dessert table? Yes, but only one cookie before dinner, Lucas said. Jamie was gone in a flash, and Lucas and Evelyn were left standing together in the crowd, closer than was probably professional, but not quite close enough. He's not wrong, you know, Lucas said quietly, about you being pretty, and I do say it every day, just usually not where you can hear me. Say it now, Evelyn challenged, her voice soft. You're beautiful, smart, kind, and the best thing that's ever happened to me outside of Jamie. Evelyn reached into her clutch and pulled out a small box, pressing it into Lucas's hand. What's this? He asked. Open it. Inside the box was a key, simple, brass, unremarkable, except for the small tag attached that read, Home. Lucas looked up at her, confused. It's a key to my place, Evelyn said, and to the lodge office at Cascade Bay. I'm offering you the position of permanent site overseer there, part-time, so you can still keep your director position, but also be hands-on with a project you care about. She paused, and Lucas saw vulnerability in her expression. I'm done making you wait outside, Lucas. I'm done pretending this is casual or temporary. I want you in my life. Really in it, not just Friday dinners and stolen moments between meetings. Lucas closed his hand around the key, feeling the weight of what she was offering. Not just access to her space, but to her life, her future, everything she was. I love you, he said, because it was true, and because keeping it inside for one more second felt impossible. Evelyn's face transformed, joy breaking through her usual composure like sunlight through clouds. I love you too. I have for weeks, maybe longer. Lucas pulled her close, kissing her right there in the middle of the gala, not caring who saw or what anyone thought. When they finally broke apart, Evelyn was laughing, her forehead pressed against his. People are staring, she murmured. Let them, Lucas said. I'm done hiding the best thing in my life. Jamie appeared at their side, cookie in hand, looking between them with the solemn wisdom of 8-year-olds everywhere. Are you guys going to get married? He asked. Evelyn choked on a laugh, and Lucas felt his face heat. Jamie, that's not really something you just ask. Eventually, Evelyn interrupted, looking at Lucas with absolute certainty. If your dad wants to, but we're not in a hurry. Good things are worth building slowly. Jamie considered this, took a bite of his cookie, and nodded. Okay, but when you do, Can I be the ring bearer? Marcus says ring bearers get to wear fancy shoes. You can be whatever you want, Evelyn promised, kneeling down to his level. Because you're part of this too, Jamie. You and your dad, you're a package deal, and I wouldn't want it any other way. Jamie hugged her, leaving cookie crumbs on her dress, and Evelyn hugged him back without hesitation. Lucas watched them together and thought about how far he'd come from that moment in the break room when Calvin had made his dare. How one humiliating bet had somehow led to this, a career he loved, a son who was thriving, and a woman who saw him not as a risk, but as someone worth choosing. The truth had cost him everything he'd thought mattered, his old job, his anonymity, his safety. But it had given him something infinitely more valuable, a life built on honesty instead of compromise, love instead of convenience, and the bone-deep knowledge that sometimes the man in work boots could stand against the empire and not just survive, but build something better in its place. Later that night, after the gala ended and Jamie was asleep in the car, on the drive home, Lucas carried his son up to their apartment and tucked him into bed. Then he sat on the edge of Jamie's mattress, watching his son sleep, and made a silent promise. He would never take shortcuts when it came to the things that mattered. Not with construction, not with his career, and especially not with the people he loved. He would build his life the right way, with proper foundations, reinforced with integrity, designed to weather any storm. And he would teach Jamie to do the same. The key Evelyn had given him sat in his pocket, solid and real. Tomorrow he'd tell her yes. To the key, to the lodge position, to whatever future they were building together. He'd say yes because she'd stood with him when it cost her, because she'd chosen honesty over convenience, because she looked at his son with genuine affection instead of obligation. But tonight, Lucas just sat in the quiet apartment, listening to Jamie breathe, and felt grateful for every choice that had led him here. The dare had been meant to break him. Instead, it had revealed what he was actually made of. And what he was made of, Lucas had learned, was stronger than anyone, including himself, had ever imagined. He stood, turned off the light, and walked to his own room, where his phone showed a text from Evelyn. Thank you for tonight. For every night, for choosing me back. I can't wait to see what we build together. Lucas smiled, typing his response. Neither can I. See you tomorrow. I love you. I love you too. Sleep well, Director Reed. Lucas set down his phone and looked around his room, modest but comfortable, safe, home. Then he pulled out the key Evelyn had given him and set it on his nightstand where he'd see it every morning when he woke up. A reminder that the best things in life weren't shortcuts or easy wins or dares accepted on someone else's terms. The best things were built slowly, honestly, with proper foundations and the courage